Chapter 506. The seawater in the blue hole boiled, and the bluish-purple electric arcs crackled on the surface of the sea. The electric currents danced like golden snakes, and it also looked like the sky filled with lightning before a storm. However, the positions of the sky and the earth were reversed. The blue hole looked like the sky, but the sky looked like the land. Gu Yanran sucked in a breath of cold air. She covered her mouth and stared at the scene in front of her with wide eyes. She murmured, "That day? That day 7 years ago, this place was like this." She remembered that the situation was almost exactly the same as now. The sky was dark, the sea was blue, and the positions of the sky and the earth seemed to be reversed. It was also that day that she suddenly received the bad news that her father and mother's flight MH210 had disappeared mid-flight. Then all the countries in the world participated in a major search. She left home in a hurry to deal with her father and mother's funeral matters. Her younger sister, Gu Nianji, insisted on taking the boat out to sea that day. Their family servants could not stop her and could only accompany her. After that, the yacht never came back. Gu Yanran closed her eyes and didn't want to continue thinking about it. Gu Nianji, who was lying behind the reef, saw the situation in the blue hole's waters and became even more anxious. What could she do to save Hua Xiaoheng and Zhao Liangzi? Those people couldn't even get close to that area by boat. Earlier, she had seen Hua Xiaoheng surface from time to time through the binoculars. Now, after so long, Hua Xiaoheng hadn't appeared again. Could it be that something bad had happened to him? Gu Nianji was frightened by her own thoughts. Her heart contracted violently, as if a large hand was squeezing her heart. All the blood in her body was squeezed out, and it rushed out of her throat. Gu Nianji only felt a fishy sweetness in her throat. She pursed her lips tightly and didn't allow herself to show any weakness. Now wasn't the time to be weak. There were people waiting for her to save in the hellish depths of the sea. Gu Nianji quietly moved down from the reef and prepared to swim below sea level. At this point, she could already see the blue hole not far away from the water. She didn't have to worry about getting lost. At this moment, she suddenly heard a series of sirens that grew louder and louder. The sirens were getting closer and closer to her. Gu Nianji was startled and was about to slide down the reef when she heard someone's voice coming from behind her. There's actually someone here?" Gu Nianji was horrified. She had been discovered. In a moment of desperation, she didn't know if the other party was a friend or foe. She just wanted to quickly slide to the bottom of the water to be safe. Unexpectedly, the other party's swimming skills were much better than hers. Her swimming skills were trained in the swimming pool, while the other person's swimming skills were obviously trained by growing up by the sea and fighting with natural waves. He quickly grabbed Gu Nianji's arm, lifted her onto the small lifeboat, and threw her into the corner. On the lifeboat, a middle-aged woman wearing black-rimmed glasses and thick bangs that covered her forehead turned around and yanked off Gu Nianji's scuba gear and diving mask. It really is you." The middle-aged woman laughed maniacally. "Gu Nianji, oh Gu Nianji. To think that you would have such a day." It was actually the woman on the dark blue yacht. Gu Nianji was extremely nervous but maintained a calm expression on her face. She said coldly, "Who are you? Do I know you?" "You don't need to know me. I only need to know you." The middle-aged woman's face was filled with the joy of getting her revenge. She smacked Gu Nianji across the face. Gu Nianji never suffered a loss. Without thinking, she slapped the middle-aged woman back and said crisply, "Can't you talk nicely? Why are you hitting me?" The middle-aged woman was stunned by Gu Nianji's slap. After a while, she came back to her senses and glared at Gu Nianji. Her eyes looked like they were about to burst into flames. "You hit me? How dare you hit me?" She then roared at her two subordinates, "What are you doing? Why aren't you tying her up?" Gu Nianji cursed silently. How could she save Hua Xiaoheng if she was tied up? She steeled her heart and pulled out the gun from her diving suit to shoot at the middle-aged woman. In the end, she was too nervous. Her hand trembled and she missed. However, this shot was enough to kill the middle-aged woman. The middle-aged woman also didn't expect Gu Nianji to have a gun in her diving suit. She paused in shock and immediately pulled one of her subordinates over to block in front of her. Gu Nianji raised her hand and fired a second shot, killing the middle-aged woman's subordinate in front of her in one shot. The middle-aged woman's other subordinate immediately pulled out a gun and fired at Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji was already prepared. After firing the second shot, she rolled on the ground and crashed into the middle-aged woman's leg. She knocked her down and began to wrestle with her. The middle-aged woman's subordinate didn't dare to shoot again. He stood to the side and looked around, afraid that he would accidentally shoot his master. Gu Nianji didn't have that much to worry about. As soon as she wrestled with the middle-aged woman, She realized that she wasn't as strong as she was. She twisted the woman's hands behind her back with one hand and knelt on one leg at the same time. She held the gun in her other hand and aimed at the man in front of her who was too afraid to shoot. She fired several shots. The middle-aged woman's second subordinate was also killed by Gun Yanji. Gun Yanji kicked the two corpses into the sea and turned to glare at the middle-aged woman. Her eyes were full of murderous intent. "How dare you kill people?" The middle-aged woman's eyes almost popped out of her head. "How dare you kill people? You knowingly broke the law." Gun Yanji was instantly emboldened with the gun in her hand. She was secretly glad that the diving suit she had randomly picked up was Hua Xiaoheng's backup diving suit. It was different from normal diving suits. There were all kinds of weapons and ropes hidden inside. They could be used to save lives and repel enemies in critical moments. They were all special military equipment from the Special Operations Forces. Gun Yanji slowly stood up and straightened her arm with the gun in her hand. She said to the middle-aged woman, "I killed people in self-defense. What do you have to say about that? Unlike you who want to kill us all." The middle-aged woman's eyes flashed and she smiled sheepishly. "We wanted to kill you all? Are you all dead?" "Not a single one died." "I'm afraid you wanted to kill us all?" "But Gun Yanji, this might all be a misunderstanding. You don't have to be like this. We can talk this out." Gun Yanji hated this woman for putting Hua Xiaoheng in danger. She didn't want to listen to her at all. Also, it was obvious that she couldn't beat her just now. Gun Yanji had killed two of her thugs before she admitted defeat. It was unnecessary for someone like her to say anything to Gun Yanji. She took a step closer and pointed the gun at the woman's head. "I don't care what misunderstanding there is. I want this boat right now. Jump off. Jump off. This is the ocean. Would I still be alive if I jumped off?" The middle-aged woman screamed exaggeratedly. Gun Yanji didn't believe her at all. "Are you going to jump or not?" Gun Yanji pushed the gun so hard that it almost made a hole in the middle-aged woman's head. TSK Gun Yanji, I really overestimated you. I didn't know you were so reckless and rude." The middle-aged woman clicked her tongue. She didn't seem afraid at all. "You finally caught me. Aren't you curious why I chased after you?" Gun Yanji raised a brow. "You chased after me? When did that happen? Why didn't I know about it?" The middle-aged woman was so angry at Gun Yanji's words that her insides trembled. Why was this little woman's mouth so annoying? She had racked her brains to plan and prepared painstakingly. She had almost killed Gun Yanji, but Gun Yanji had inexplicably escaped several times. Even this time, Gun Yanji was 3 against 1, but Gun Yanji still managed to turn the tables. Was she really no match for Gun Yanji? The middle-aged woman stared at Gun Yanji with a strange expression. "You really don't know? Don't you remember one day last year when you went to your classmate's birthday party and got drugged?" Gun Yanji's heart skipped a beat. How did this middle-aged woman know about this? "Who are you?" Gun Yanji's voice lowered with obvious confusion. The middle-aged woman was overjoyed. She knew Gun Yanji had fallen into her trap. She laughed. "Do you really want to know who I am? You really don't know?" As the two of them spoke, a loud whistle sounded again. Gun Yanji's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't delay any longer. Hua Xiaoheng was still waiting for her to save him. Every minute she delayed would put him in more danger. Therefore she wasn't curious at all. She said coldly, "I don't care who you are. Tell me if you want. I'll give you 3 seconds to jump. I'll count to 3. If you don't jump, I'll shoot." The middle-aged woman's expression changed when she heard the whistle. Her tone immediately changed. She said darkly, "It's fine if you don't want to know. Women who get drugged with H3OB7 all end up badly anyway. Gun Yanji, isn't the feeling of sleeping with 7 men very exhilarating?" This is the second update. Let me remind you about the monthly votes and recommendation votes. There are 2 updates of 5,000 to 6,000 words every day. Are they still not satisfied? The group was full of kisses. Chapter 507. What the hell are you talking about? Gun Yanji's heart raced, but she refused to admit defeat verbally. She retorted, "What the hell is H3OB7? You could turn the entire Sahara Desert into fertile farmland if you let the water out of your brain. Why are you still wasting your breath here?" The middle-aged woman saw that Gun Yanji didn't seem to care at all and didn't seem to be faking it. Could she really be fine? Impossible. After thinking about it carefully, she confirmed her belief in H3OB7. That thing was indeed incurable, and had been proven by countless Chinese women. Gun Yanji was no exception. Haha, you don't remember? That's even better. Go and check what kind of aphrodisiac you took back then. Don't get married in the future and your husband won't even know what color the hat on his head is. The middle-aged woman's words were also very vicious. Moreover, it was difficult for people to distinguish between the truth and lies. Gunyenji was different. She had no recollection of what had happened after the aphrodisiac took effect. She only remembered finding Qinlai before the drug took effect. She was very confident in Qinlai's medical skills, so the painful consequences the middle-aged woman spoke of had definitely not happened to her. Of course, she was even more confident in Hua Xiaoheng's abilities. With Hua Xiaoheng around, no matter what difficulties she encountered, he would be able to overcome them. However, the middle-aged woman's words immediately made her realize, "You're Yamaguchi Yuko." She didn't remember much of what had happened back then, and had only heard bits and pieces from Qinlai and Hua Xiaoheng. She also knew that Hua Xiaoheng and his men were investigating Yamaguchi Yuko. Of course, she also knew that the aphrodisiac her classmate Feng Yishi had obtained had come from a Japanese woman, Yamaguchi Yuko. She had also seen Yamaguchi Yuko's portrait at Hua Xiaoheng's place. Although it wasn't exactly the same, the general outline was still recognizable. Yamaguchi Yuko was the only one who knew so many things back then. "So you really didn't die?" Gunyenji tightened her grip on the gun. The bolt clicked and the gun was loaded. She pressed the gun against the middle-aged woman's forehead. She used so much force that a round red mark appeared on the woman's forehead. "That's even better. I won't have to feel guilty about killing you anymore." "You really want to kill me?" The middle-aged woman's expression changed several times in an instant, as if she had never expected Gunyenji to be this vicious. She glared at Gunyenji and said bitterly, "Someone like you is actually a law student? Knowingly breaking the law was an additional crime. You really should let everyone see your true colors for what you've done. How disgusting." Gunyenji was surprised again and raised a pair of beautiful long eyebrows. Her dark eyes stared at the middle-aged woman thoughtfully. She thought to herself that this person really knew a lot about her situation. Who exactly was she? However, this thought only spun around in her mind once before it was pushed to the back of her mind. Who cares who she is? Even if he was someone she once knew, she wouldn't let him off the hook even if he was someone she used to know. What a joke. She should have died 100 times over for putting Hua Xiaoheng in danger, not to mention the fact that she had tried to harm her many times before. Gunyenji had made up her mind. She pulled the trigger and said in a low voice, "Are you jumping or not? I'm starting to count 1, 2, 3. She hadn't even finished the word 3, when she heard the whistle coming one after the other. It was so loud that it hurt her eardrums. Gunyenji finally looked in the direction of the whistle. A huge ship appeared on the horizon, facing the direction of the sun and heading in their direction. Gunyenji froze. The middle-aged woman seized the opportunity to grab her wrist and forcefully snatch her gun. "You're asking for it." Gunyenji snapped back to reality and raised her long leg to kick the middle-aged woman who was trying to wrestle with her off the lifeboat. "Get as far away from me as you can. If I see you again, I won't be so polite anymore." Gunyenji took the gun and fired several shots at the water, creating a large white splash. "Stop. Stop right now. What are you doing?" Gu Yenran's voice came from behind Gunyenji. She was shocked and angry at the same time. Her usually crisp and clear voice trembled slightly. Gunyenji turned around and saw Gu Yenran standing on a lifeboat that had already arrived near her. Gunyenji looked in the direction Gu Yenran had come from and confirmed that the black yacht she had seen earlier belonged to Gu Yenran, which meant it belonged to the Gus. She felt a bit strange, but she didn't act coy. Her face darkened as she watched Gu Yenran's sailors jump into the sea and rescue the middle-aged woman onto their lifeboat. "You're Gunyenji? Why are you in Barbados?" Gu Yenran finally saw the tall girl in front of her and was shocked. She looked at the gun in her hand and said in shock, "Why are you holding a gun? Why are you trying to kill others? Nyenji, how can you disregard the law like this?" Gu Nyenji's eyes were still on the middle-aged woman who had been rescued. She didn't even look at Gu Yenran and said calmly, "Miss Gu, don't talk to me about the law. This is international waters. May I ask which country's laws are you following?" The middle-aged woman had her eyes closed and was wrapped in a thin blanket. She had been curled up in a corner of Gu Yenran's lifeboat the entire time. Her expression was indifferent and she didn't say a word. Gu Nyenji looked at her again before looking at Gu Yenran. She suddenly asked, "You know each other?" Before Gu Yenran could answer, the middle-aged woman suddenly laughed strangely. "Of course she knows me. She even vouched for me and let me go abroad." "Ah, you're all stupid." "Shut up." Gu Yenran couldn't stand the woman's insults anymore. "I saved your life. Don't bite the hand that fed you." Gu Nianji looked at Gu Yanran, then at the middle-aged woman. Pursing her lips, she put the gun back into her diving suit and turned to start the lifeboat. Oh. Nianji, what are you doing? Gu Yanran quickly stopped her. Are you going to save Mr. Hua? With this small lifeboat? It's useless. Gu Nianji's movements paused. The scene of the lifeboat of the same model being instantly charred by the blue hole's violet electric arcs appeared in her mind. However, she still lowered her head and fiddled with the lifeboat's engine. She couldn't not save him just because she knew it was dangerous. Not long after she started the lifeboat, Gu Nianji didn't even look back as she piloted the lifeboat towards the blue hole's waters. Come back. Come back. Don't go die. We can think of another way. Gu Yanran shouted anxiously. However, Gu Nianji's lifeboat was going so fast and the engine was so loud, it was impossible to hear her. Why is this child so stubborn? Gu Yanran sighed and turned to see the middle-aged woman curled up in the corner of the lifeboat. She asked in confusion, "Why did you come back? Where are your subordinates?" They were killed by Gu Nianji. This little girl is really something. She kills without batting an eye. The middle-aged woman spat in disdain and looked at Gu Yanran. Since I'm on your boat, you should save me until the end. I have no obligation to save you. Gu Yanran frowned and said impatiently, I told you not to leave by yourself, but you didn't listen. Now you don't even have anyone with you. How are you going to explain yourself when you go back? The middle-aged woman laughed. You don't have to worry about how I explain myself. You'd better. Her gaze wandered as she watched Gu Nianji's lifeboat approach the blue hole's waters and sail towards the ocean full of bluish-purple electric arcs. Gu Yanran's gaze followed her. Sigh, such a beautiful little girl. Why is she so stubborn? Gu Yanran couldn't bear to watch. Let's go back. She directed her lifeboat to return to her yacht. The middle-aged woman's gaze was fixed on Gu Nianji's small lifeboat in front of her. Gu Nianji looked at the ocean full of bluish-purple electric arcs in front of her, and fear appeared in her eyes. It wasn't that she wasn't afraid. Growing up, the most dangerous time was probably the beginning of her memory, the car accident when she was 12 years old. Ever since she met Hua Xiaoheng that time, she had been tightly and safely protected by him. These 6 or 7 years were probably the best time of her life. However, the person who had given her a second life was now in danger. No matter how scared she was, it couldn't stop her determination to enter the Dead Sea. If she was going to die, she wanted to die with Hua Xiaoheng. Gu Nianji's expression became determined. She quietly looked at the ocean full of bluish-purple electric arcs and forced herself to find a solution within 10 minutes. According to her calculations, the oxygen tanks that Hua Xiaoheng and Zhao Liangzi brought could only last for 3 hours at most. 2.5 hours had already passed, and there was still half an hour left for emergency response. Therefore, she had less than 10 minutes left. Could she find a solution within 10 minutes? If she had a supercomputer and all kinds of engineering equipment, there was still hope of solving the ocean full of bluish-purple electric arcs in 10 minutes. However, she had nothing now. She only had a cell phone, and it was even configured for gaming. It was impossible to use it for large-scale calculations. Then she looked at the set of Swiss Army knives in her diving suit. Could these be considered engineering equipment? What a joke! Gu Nianji took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She tried her best to tell herself to calm down, There must be a solution, there must be a solution. As long as the arrangement of the blue hole was arranged by someone, there must be a solution. She was no longer the little girl who was tied up in the car and couldn't do anything about the fire. She had a solution. She must have a solution. Gu Nianji suddenly opened her eyes and thought of the first problem. Since the blue hole could produce bluish-purple electric arcs, what kind of power generator would be needed to produce bluish-purple electric arcs of this scale? This is the first update, 3,000 words. Reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. There will be an extra update at 7 p.m. Group chat. P.S. Actually, this story is very rich in content. I've already written a detailed outline, but I just didn't have time to write it. I'm crying. This is the time of the year when I'm so busy. I envy authors who can write full-time. Chapter 508. There were only a few common ways to generate electricity. Hydropower, wind power, thermal power, solar power, and nuclear power. Gu Nianji quickly recalled the physics knowledge she had learned from the Special Operations Forces teachers about electricity resources. Combining it with the situation around the blue hole, she decisively ruled out the possibility of thermal power and hydropower. Hydropower required a large drop or a temperature difference in the sea to generate electricity, but the terrain and hydrological conditions obviously didn't meet the requirements for hydropower. Also, hydropower required large-scale infrastructure construction. The environment around the blue hole didn't have any signs of artificial construction. It maintained its original appearance, so the possibility of hydropower could be completely ruled out. There was no need to mention thermal power. The sea around the blue hole didn't have the natural conditions for thermal power generation. Other than hydropower and thermal power, which required large-scale infrastructure, wind power and nuclear power also had very high requirements for power generation. Large-scale infrastructure construction was essential. Gunyenji quickly ruled out hydropower, thermal power, wind power and nuclear power. She focused on solar power. Solar power was a power generation method that could be large or small, complex or simple. Gunyenji didn't know much about solar power, but she knew the general principle. The Special Operations Forces also had solar power panels. She had been curious and secretly climbed to the roof to observe them. The world's best solar power circuit boards had already been developed to the point of being small and light. They could even be carried around. Like other technologies, all the most advanced technologies were in the military field. Solar power was no exception. Gunyenji's heart skipped a beat. She looked at the blue hole's environment again and immediately noticed something different. She observed the large and small reefs that surfaced near the blue hole's waters. These reefs looked no different from normal reefs at first glance. However, if one looked closely, they would discover that the irregular shape and rough texture of the reefs actually had other secrets. Gunyenji focused on the reefs. Her eyes gradually focused on a place not far from her lifeboat. The location of the reef was very coincidental. Half of it was inside the blue hole's waters and the other half was outside. If it really was solar power like she imagined, then the location of the reef was really remarkable. She followed the position of the reef and looked around the blue hole's waters. She immediately discovered something. The area between the blue hole's waters and the normal sea was dotted with reefs like this. Half of them were in the blue hole's waters and the other half were in the normal sea. It would be perfect to use them as a carrier for solar power. Gunyenji's eyes lit up, and she steered the lifeboat towards the reef. Suddenly, a commotion and argument erupted on Guyenran's yacht. Gunyenji was so absorbed in her thoughts that she was awakened by the noise on the other side. She subconsciously looked in that direction. At the bow of Guyenran's yacht, the middle-aged woman was holding Guyenran hostage with a gun. She stood with her back to the surface of the sea. Guyenran's neck was tightly strangled by the middle-aged woman. Guyenran kept trying to break the middle-aged woman's arm, but she couldn't break it. The middle-aged woman pointed her gun at Guyenran's housekeeper and bodyguards and kept shouting. Gunyenji felt that Guyenran deserved it. That middle-aged woman was obviously not a good person, but she still saved her and went to her yacht. She averted her gaze and ignored Guyenran. She focused on jumping onto the reef. The area between the blue hole's waters and the normal sea was filled with reefs of all sizes. Gunyenji had to steer very carefully to avoid those reefs. Arriving in front of the reef closest to her, Gunyenji stopped the lifeboat and visually measured the distance between her and the reef. She took out a suitable length of rope from her diving suit, tied it into a circle and threw it towards the reef. She threw it twice and caught it on the reef. Then she pulled it tight and kicked off the bottom of the boat. She jumped up and pounced on the reef. She landed successfully. Gunyenji almost laughed out loud, but soon she couldn't laugh anymore. The reef was actually electrified. She couldn't tell how many volts it was. Of course, it was lower than the bluish-purple electric arcs in the blue hole's waters, but it was still beyond what the average human body could withstand. Gunyenji felt like thousands of tiny needles were poking into her body. It wasn't particularly painful at first, but after 3 seconds the pain spread throughout her entire body. She clenched her teeth to prevent herself from moaning. Ignoring the pain all over her body, she half-squatted on the reef and began to use the simple circuit detection device on the Special Operations Force's all-purpose diving suit to find traces of solar circuit boards. Not long after, she found a clue and was instantly amazed. She didn't know who was so smart. These weren't F*King reefs at all. They were solar circuit boards disguised as reefs. And a very advanced and novel paint was used on the outside. This paint could not only disguise the texture of the reef to protect the circuit board inside, but it could also multiply the absorption of solar energy. This was very unbelievable. The reason solar power hadn't been widely used was actually because the conversion rate of solar energy itself was too low. Its performance was low and it caused serious environmental pollution. However, these natural solar reef slabs near the blue hole not only had a high conversion rate, but they also realized recycling of the circuit device, so the pollution to the environment was almost minimized. This was also why this area of the sea had been able to maintain its original appearance. Using the environment while simultaneously transforming and protecting the environment. This kind of technology was truly mature and sustainable. While Gunyenji was amazed, she also had to carefully avoid the bluish-purple electric arcs near the blue hole on the other side of the reef. Those arcs were obviously high-voltage electricity. If she were to come into contact with them, she would definitely die. It didn't matter if she died, but what about Hua Xiaoheng and Zhao Liangzi? Gunyenji would never let that happen. Now that she knew where the power generator was, the next step was to destroy the power generator here. Gunyenji looked up and counted. There were about 8 similar reefs arranged in an octagonal shape. Her time was limited, so she didn't have the time to climb onto those reefs one by one to destroy them. Now was the time to use the destructive weapon. Gunyenji took out her gun from her diving suit and aimed at several similar reefs nearby. She fired continuously, causing the reefs to shatter into pieces and completely destroying the external coating and internal wiring of the power generator. 2 minutes later, the bluish-purple electric arcs in the blue hole's waters weakened at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon they weren't as strong as before. Instead, they were like scattered blue will-o'-the-wisps floating on the azure blue sea. Gunyenji was overjoyed. She knew she had found the right direction. Just as she was about to continue looking for those reefs to shoot, she heard a loud noise coming from Gu Yanran's yacht. "Let me go. Let me go. You can't bite the hand that feeds you." It was Gu Yanran's hoarse voice. Gunyenji quickly turned around and saw that on the 3rd floor of Gu Yanran's yacht, the middle-aged woman had taken a gun from somewhere and was holding Gu Yanran hostage with it. She stood with her back facing the blue hole's waters. "I have nothing now. Get your family to pay the ransom." The middle-aged woman's cackling was like a demon's voice piercing through Gunyenji's mind. Gunyenji frowned and slowly raised the gun in her hand. She wanted to take the opportunity to shoot the middle-aged woman from behind and help Gu Yanran out of trouble. She couldn't just watch Gu Yanran get killed in front of her. However, before she could do anything, Gu Yanran's situation changed. The middle-aged woman suddenly stumbled and fell forward. Gu Yanran somehow escaped from the middle-aged woman's grasp and also had a gun in her hand. She fired multiple shots at the middle-aged woman's chest and then kicked her into the sea. The seawater was immediately dyed red with blood. The middle-aged woman's corpse quickly floated up and floated in the sea. Yamaguchi Yuko, whom Hua Xiaoheng and the others had been chasing for so long, was dead just like that. And Gu Yanran had killed her herself? Gunyenji's eyes widened and her mouth almost couldn't close. However, she was only shocked for a moment. She immediately turned around and planned to find a place to jump into the waters of the blue hole. Her attention was focused on figuring out how to find the place where the blue electric arcs were the weakest to jump into. She didn't notice that the huge ship she had seen earlier had anchored nearby. A fully equipped lifeboat several times larger than her lifeboat had been released from the ship and was speeding towards her. "Gu Nyenji, get back here." An angry roar came from behind her, and the clear, cold voice pulled Gu Nyenji back from her thoughts. She turned around in shock again and saw Hijichu standing on a white ship. He was glaring at her angrily. "Professor He? Why are you here?" Gunyenji's shock turned to joy. She smiled and waved at him. Then she quickly turned around and jumped into the area where the blue electric arcs were the weakest. It wasn't that she didn't want to listen to Hijichu, but Hua Xiaoheng couldn't wait any longer. She didn't have time to explain to him. Hijichu, who had just rushed over, watched Gunyenji's slender figure jump into the waters of the blue hole that still had weak electric sparks. This was the 2nd time she had met with an accident in front of him. This time no one stopped him. Hijichu didn't say anything and jumped down as well. This was the 2nd update. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. The group chat was silent. Chapter 509. Gunyenji fell into the water without making a sound. She didn't make a single splash, just like the best diver. As soon as she touched the water, she felt the pressure of the electric shock coming from all directions. It was as if he had slipped through a pile of countless needles, and every inch of his skin was densely pricked. She gritted her teeth and endured the pain as she quickly dove into the deep sea. Sure enough, as long as she endured the initial pain of entering the water, there was almost no electric current when she reached about 2 meters below the surface. Gunyenji opened her eyes at the bottom of the sea and looked at the clear blue world in front of her. She thought about the situation in her mind and was filled with respect and admiration for the person who had set up this area of the sea. Pure water didn't conduct electricity, but normal water contained impurities and would definitely conduct electricity. Seawater, on the other hand, would definitely conduct electricity. However, the person who set up this place had cleverly wrapped the area around the blue hole with electric arcs. From top to bottom, it was an invisible line of defense that separated it from the normal sea. That's amazing. Gu Nianji praised in her heart as she quickly swam to the bottom of the blue hole. Huo Xiaoheng returned to the crevice where he was hiding with Zhao Liangzi. Seeing that he was still fiddling with the communication device, he smiled wryly and patted Zhao Liangzi's shoulder. Zhao Liangzi suddenly looked up and screamed in surprise when he saw Huo Xiaoheng had returned. He pounced to hug his shoulder and patted it hard, splashing water everywhere. His screams were muffled by the sealed diving mask, so Huo Xiaoheng couldn't hear them. However, he could feel Zhao Liangzi's excitement from the vibration of his shoulder patting. Huo Xiaoheng also patted his shoulder and hid in the crevice with him. They used sign language to talk about the situation on the surface of the sea. Zhao Liangzi finally realized that the electric fence could even seal off the surface of the sea. If it weren't for the diving goggles, Zhao Liangzi thought his eyes would have popped out of their sockets. He excitedly signed to Huo Xiaoheng. We originally thought it was a more advanced military electric fence, but now it looks like it's more advanced than any known military electric fence in the world. Huo Xiaoheng nodded but wasn't as excited as Zhao Liangzi. If they could use such an advanced technology, he would naturally be ecstatic. But now, such an advanced thing had become a cage that troubled them. How could he be happy? If such advanced technology were to be obtained by other countries, just the thought of it would be terrifying. The two of them had their backs against each other as they rested in the crevice between the rocks. To conserve oxygen, the two of them only used one scuba and took turns wearing it for a few minutes. Gradually, time passed, and the oxygen in their oxygen tanks was running out. They didn't plan to spend too much time here, so their oxygen tanks were the smallest type. They would run out sooner or later. In order to increase Huo Xiaoheng's chances of survival, Zhao Liangzi had been reducing his oxygen intake since 10 minutes ago in order to conserve more oxygen for Huo Xiaoheng. Huo Xiaoheng was more important than him. He was willing to give Huo Xiaoheng the chance to live. Even if he died, it would be worth it. Moreover, Huo Xiaoheng would definitely avenge him. When the time came, he would write a few programs for him and burn them for him. He would be able to keep an eye on the development of computer software in the afterlife. He also reduced his activities to conserve his energy and try not to be discovered by Huo Xiaoheng. Not long after, he felt that he was beginning to hallucinate and see things. In front of him was no longer the clear blue sea, but a beautiful villa. Two young and beautiful women in snow-white tennis outfits were holding tennis rackets and going to the tennis court to play tennis. The two of them giggled and the sunlight shone through the gaps in the leaves. The taller girl's skin was almost golden brown, and when she smiled, she revealed her snow-white teeth. Her plump lips were the place he wanted to taste the most. Yes, this taller girl was the Baiyuan in his heart. He looked at this scene in a trance and reached out his hand, wanting to touch the beautiful woman's face. However, the woman was like a soap bubble. Just as his hand reached out, she disappeared without a trace in front of him. In front of him was still the clear blue sea. It was quiet, without any waves or ripples. Zhao Liangzi was disappointed, and the lack of oxygen in his brain worsened. Don't go. Don't go. He tried to reach forward to grab the disappearing figure, but he couldn't control himself and fell forward. Only then did Huo Xiaoheng realize Zhao Liangzi's condition. He grabbed him by the shoulders and slapped his face hard, but Zhao Liangzi didn't react at all. He had already fainted. Huo Xiaoheng quickly brought the scuba gear over and connected it to Zhao Liangzi's diving mask so he could breathe. However, Zhao Liangzi didn't know if he was already unconscious and couldn't breathe, or if he refused to breathe even though he was unconscious and insisted on leaving the last bottle for Huo Xiaoheng. Huo Xiaoheng tightly hugged Zhao Liangzi's lifeless body. The grief and anger in his heart were indescribable. They could be sacrificed, but it was his fault to make such a worthless sacrifice. He couldn't let Zhao Liangzi die here. He had to get him out. Huo Xiaoheng gritted his teeth and picked Zhao Liangzi up. He kicked off with both legs and shot out like an arrow. He used all his strength to swim to the surface. This time he wanted to use his body as a meat shield to get Zhao Liangzi out. Unless the gunman on the surface blew his body to pieces with bombs, he still had to protect his comrades. Gu Nianji paddled her arms like a mermaid as she dove in the deep blue sea. The deeper she dived, the weaker the electric current became. Gu Nianji could no longer feel the pain of the electric shock when she was 10 meters below the surface. She quickly increased her diving speed and opened her eyes wide to search for traces of Zhao Liangzi and Huo Xiaoheng. After diving into the blue hole, she realized that she had indeed been too reckless. The blue hole was so vast. How was she going to find Huo Xiaoheng and Zhao Liangzi? However, as soon as she thought about it, she immediately had an idea. She was now certain that their communicators weren't working because of the interference and blockage of the electric arc. She had already dived into the blue hole. The electric arc was blocking outside traffic at the edge of the blue hole, so it shouldn't be a problem inside, right? Gunyenji took out a small communicator that came with her diving suit and tapped on it. She used the Morse code she had learned from Yin Shixiang to send messages over and over again. This is Gunyenji. Wuxiao Brother Zhe, where are you? I have already dived into the blue hole. She desperately wanted to send the coordinates displayed on her diving equipment. Hua Xiaoheng's face was solemn as he struggled to swim while carrying Zhao Liangzi. He suddenly felt the small communicator hanging around his neck vibrate. As he swam, he felt the vibration from the communicator. It felt more and more familiar. It was like the Morse code. He quickly took the communicator off and put it to his ear to listen. Beep beep, beep, beep beep de. A series of Morse code signals kept coming, repeating the same message over and over again. This is Gunyenji. Wuxiao Brother Zhe, where are you? I have already dived into the blue hole. Hua Xiaoheng understood the meaning of the Morse code and was so shocked that he forgot to swim. He stayed in the water for a few seconds with Zhao Liangzi on his shoulder before speeding in the direction Gunyenji had mentioned. Gunyenji's method was very effective. She quickly received Hua Xiaoheng's reply and was overjoyed. She almost forgot that she was in the blue hole where life and death were at stake. She was so happy that she spun in circles in the water. She was also very excited as she watched the water splash. This was what Hua Xiaoheng saw when he swam over with Zhao Liangzi on his shoulder. Gunyenji, wearing a black diving suit, was like a night elf. She spun in the dark blue water, revealing her slender figure in the surging waves. Even Hua Xiaoheng, who was a distance away, could feel the joy from the bottom of her heart. His heart felt like a snowy mountain had collapsed and buried everything. There was only a beautiful figure dancing in the vast snow. The corners of Hua Xiaoheng's eyes were a little wet. He quickly raised his head and took a deep breath to calm himself down. This silly child, he swam over with Zhao Liangzi on his shoulder. Gunyenji spun in another circle and saw Hua Xiaoheng's figure when she turned around. She welcomed him with joy and wanted to jump into his arms, but she saw Zhao Liangzi on his shoulder. She suddenly understood and gestured to Hua Xiaoheng. What happened to Brother Zhe? Is he in danger? Hua Xiaoheng shook his head and gestured a few times. He asked her, why did you come down? Where are the shooters up there? He had no choice but to dive back into the water when the violet electric arcs appeared. He didn't know what was happening on the surface. Gunyenji gestured simply. They're all dead. Yamaguchi Yuko is also dead. Yes, the middle-aged woman who wanted to kill you. It's a long story, but the surface is safe now. I smashed the electric fence's power supply, and the electric arcs on the surface have weakened. Let's go up. Hua Xiaoheng was overjoyed and couldn't help pulling Gunyenji over. He wrapped an arm around her slender waist and hugged her tightly. Gunyenji clung to his side. At this time she was as weak as a silk vine and couldn't even stand. Hua Xiaoheng's strong arm wrapped around her waist as she floated in the clear blue water. Everything was as beautiful as a dream. Even the violet electric arcs on the surface had become the background of the dream. Hijichu's face darkened as he jumped into the water behind Gunyenji and quickly swam forward. However, just as he swam to the edge of the blue hole's waters, the already weakened electric fence suddenly seemed to be recharged. Suddenly, the violet electric arcs lit up and crackled incessantly. Hijichu tried to barge in several times, but was almost killed by the electric shocks. The last time he was completely electrocuted. If his subordinates hadn't arrived quickly and taken him away, he would have died there. Gunyenji jumped into the sea without a care in the world, leaving Yin Shixiang running around in circles on the wrecked Millennium Oda. He thought about it and finally contacted the Barbados office and the Cuban consulate general. He quickly reported the situation here and requested for the best military helicopter to be sent over to rescue them. When the people from the consulate general heard that Hua Xiaoheng was in danger, they immediately reported back. 10 minutes later, the newest military helicopter took off from Cuba and headed towards the blue hole that Yin Shixiang had mentioned. Gunyenji and Hua Xiaoheng finally swam close to the blue hole's waters with the fainted Zhao Liangzi. Looking up, Hua Xiaoheng quickly grabbed Gunyenji, who was about to swim up. Above their heads, the electric arcs that had weakened earlier were lit up again. Like a ghostly blue flame, it burned the wasteland of death. This is the first update, 3,200 words. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. There will be an additional update at 7 p.m. The group chat is full. Thank you for subscribing, tipping, and voting. Chapter 510. Gunyenji stared in shock at the violet electric arcs above her head. She was so shocked she couldn't speak for a long time. She swam in circles, wanting to get out of Hua Xiaoheng's arms to see what was going on. Hua Xiaoheng grabbed her arm tightly and wouldn't let her leave his side. However, Gunyenji knew that she couldn't hide behind Hua Xiaoheng right now. If this continued, all three of them would die. Gunyenji raised her hand to sign to Hua Xiaoheng. I'll go up and see what's going on. I clearly broke the solar panels, so the power generation can't be used. Where did these violet electric arcs come from? Hua Xiaoheng held her hand and looked at her quietly for a while through the diving mask. He wrote on her palm stroke by stroke. The circuit setup here isn't that simple. It's impossible that there's only one circuit system. Gunyenji understood instantly. Her home's Wi-Fi had backup power, and this was a huge layout. The backup power must have been activated. Then she couldn't back down. Since she was here, she had to rescue these two people. Gunyenji held Hua Xiaoheng's hand and pouted at Zhao Yangzi, who was on Hua Xiaoheng's shoulder. Brother Zhe, have you heard enough? Hua Xiaoheng froze and instinctively turned to look at Zhao Yangzi, thinking that he had woken up. Gunyenji took the opportunity to twist her hand and like a fish, she escaped Hua Xiaoheng's grasp and quickly swam to the surface. She even dared to lie to him. She was getting bolder. Hua Xiaoheng jerked his head up and chased after her with Zhao Yangzi on his shoulder. The resistance in the water was unusually high, and he was carrying someone, so even though he was very good at swimming, he couldn't swim as fast as Gunyenji. Gunyenji quickly swam to the blue hole's surface. Even through the thick diving goggles, she could still feel the violet electric arcs. They were so bright they could blind people. Gritting her teeth, she hugged her arms above her head and quickly slapped the water with her legs to rush to the surface. Zap! The loud sound of the electric arcs sounded on the surface of the water, and Gunyenji felt like she was crawling through a pile of needles again. Countless tiny needles as thin as a cow's hair pricked her body, but she couldn't see any blood. Even the pain was blocked in her bones and she felt like she was suffocating. Gunyenji wasn't knocked down. Instead, she was inspired by the pain. She stared at the violet electric arcs in front of her, clenched her fists and said to herself, "Then let's try it. Let's see who's better, you or me." She closed her eyes and rushed forward again. As soon as she emerged from the water, a large string of bluish-purple electric arcs exploded above her head. There was actually the sound of thunder and lightning. Gunyenji didn't dare open her eyes. She endured the burning pain in her head and quickly dived back into the water. Would this electric arc make her lose all her hair and become bald? Although Gunyenji was anxious, she couldn't help but be concerned about her appearance. This was truly intolerable. Gunyenji opened her eyes again after returning to the bottom of the water. She stared at the violet electric arcs on the surface of the water for a while before rushing up again. This time she lasted longer than the first time, but it was still painful. Even her bones were burning with pain. Fortunately, her pain tolerance was unusually high. Most people would have either fainted or been electrocuted to death at this time, but she could still break through the sea level twice in a row. Although she couldn't break free from the electric arc of the sea level, she was much stronger than the average person. On He Jichu's ship and Gu Yanran's yacht, there were people paying attention to the sparkling violet electric arcs in the water. When they saw Gunyenji rush out from the bottom of the water for the first time and get hit by the violet electric arcs above her head, they all regretfully closed their eyes and mourned for her. They thought she was definitely going to die. When they saw Gunyenji rush out from the bottom of the water for the second time and get hit by the violet electric arcs again, they were extremely shocked. No one had ever been able to escape from the electric arcs alive. But they really saw someone get hit by the violet electric arcs and be fine. Their interest was piqued. Everyone took out their binoculars to watch Gunyenji emerge from the bottom of the water again and again, but she was hit by the electric arcs again and again. He Jichu woke up and walked to the front of the ship with a solemn expression. He took the binoculars from someone and saw Gunyenji persevere in fighting against the violet electric arcs. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. This child had been so stubborn since she was young. When she first came to his side at the age of 6, she liked to play in the little garden. Once, someone put a small taihu stone on the path she often walked in the garden. The taihu stone was a natural fit with the surrounding landscape and was very rustic when it was placed on the path. Also, Hijichu's father liked the taihu stone very much, so everyone thought it was a good thing. No one thought that Gunyenji often walked this path alone and that Hijichu's father actually never came here. Gunyenji didn't like the stone and requested that the stumbling block in her path be moved away. Hijichu didn't care at the time and only thought it was just a stone, so there was no need to be so serious. But she was so stubborn that no one helped her move it, so she would secretly get up at night and run to the garden to move the stone away and throw it into the grass before happily going back to sleep. That night, Hijichu followed behind little Gunyenji with great interest and watched her slyly avoid the guards, crawl through the hallway, avoid the lights and run like a cat to the path in the garden. Then she huffed and puffed with all her strength and finally threw away the small Taihu stone. Just like now, she was certain that the violet electric arcs were the stumbling block in her path, so she didn't hesitate to knock her head and bleed to get through this obstacle. Hijichu rubbed his temples and his cold eyes softened. He ordered someone to bring a loudspeaker and shouted at the blue hole. "Don't go up. Go below. It's easier." The person shouting didn't quite understand what those words meant, but Hijichu knew Gunyenji would understand. When Gunyenji popped her head up again, the violet electric arcs hit her so hard that her bones hurt. But this time she heard Hijichu shout. She quickly dove back to the bottom of the sea. At that moment, Hua Xiaoheng finally caught up and grabbed her, not allowing her to torture herself on the surface of the sea again. Gunyenji pushed Hua Xiaoheng's hand away and signaled to him, "Hua Xiao, I also want to save myself. I don't want to die here." Hua Xiaoheng hugged her and let go. He signaled to her, "Wait for me here. I'll take him out first and come get you." Gunyenji pulled him back and pointed at the violet electric arcs above. She earnestly wrote on his palm, "Don't go. If you get electrocuted and I can't carry the two of you, I will definitely give up on Brother Zhe. Hua Xiao, are you willing to watch Brother Zhe die like this?" Hua Xiaoheng didn't speak but looked deeply at Gunyenji. After all, she had grown up by his side, so she knew his thoughts too well. He really wouldn't let Zhao Liangzi die, but he also didn't want Gunyenji to die. If possible, he was willing to die in their place. "Hua Xiao, I'll be fine." Gunyenji tilted her head with a smile and stretched out her arms to swim one round in the water. "Look, I'm fine. I'm really fine. I won't die. These electric arcs are nothing. I was just thinking about how to get you and Brother Zhe out. These electric arcs are fine for me but not for you. I'm worried that the voltage will be too high and you won't be able to handle it." Hua Xiaoheng knew about the uniqueness of Gunyenji's physique, and he had personally seen Gunyenji swim in and out of the sea of violet electric arcs several times. She was still alive and kicking, so he somewhat believed her words. But he still couldn't help feeling sorry for her. Gunyenji had grown up with him and had never been tortured like this except for the times when she fell while running. "Let's try again. This time we won't go from the top. We'll go from the bottom." Gunyenji pointed in the opposite direction. "That's the normal sea. Let's go over. There's also an electric fence there. We've tried it before." Hua Xiaoheng shook his head with a wry smile and gently swayed Gunyenji's hand in the water. "Come, I'll carry you both and rush out together." Hua Xiaoheng planned to be the human shield and send Gunyenji and Zhao Liangzi through the electric fence on the side of the blue hole. If they couldn't get out from the surface, they could only swim through the invisible electric fence from the bottom of the sea. "No." Gunyenji quickly shook her head and splashed water. "I'll try first. Maybe it'll be different from before?" She struggled out of Hua Xiaoheng's hand and swam horizontally. Soon after, they arrived at the border between the blue hole and the normal sea. It was only a shallow distance below the surface of the sea, no more than 3 meters. Any further down and it was all limestone that couldn't be dug. Gunyenji had to swim through the vertical sea that was less than 3 meters deep to leave the electric fence in the blue hole and return to the normal sea. Hua Xiaoheng looked at her nervously. He and Zhao Liangzi had both tried it before and had passed out for a few seconds from the electric shock. Losing consciousness at the bottom of the sea could be fatal. He was prepared to rush over and snatch Gunyenji the moment she passed out. Gunyenji swam to the top of the limestone. The water pressure at a height of about 3 meters wasn't that great, so she felt much more relaxed. Reaching out, she tried to touch the invisible electric fence in front of her. Zap! A burning pain came from her fingertips and pierced her heart, but it was much less powerful than the violet electric arcs at the surface of the sea. Gunyenji's heart skipped a beat. Even she couldn't withstand the violet electric arcs at the surface of the sea and had electrocuted her back into the water again and again. The voltage here was much lower than the electric arcs at the surface of the sea. Could it be that the auxiliary power source could only make the violet electric arcs bluff? Could it be that the electric fence was unavoidably weakened by her? Gunyenji's heart rose with hope. She closed her eyes and hugged her chest with her arms. Kicking her legs, she slammed into the invisible electric fence in front of her. Electric shock. Pain followed her like a shadow. His bones were making cracking sounds. But this time she successfully broke out. This is the second part. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation tickets. Love you all. Chapter 511. There was no visible fence between the blue hole's waters and normal waters, but the invisible electric fence was even more intimidating. Gunyanji broke out and immediately swam to the surface. This time, there was no blue-violet electric arc above her head. She stuck her head out of the sea, took off her diving mask and let out a long sigh of relief. There was a burst of cheers from the nearby docked ships and yachts. They were all happy that someone had finally escaped from the terrifying blue-violet electric arc. Gunyanji heard everyone's cheers and even reached out to wave at them. At that moment, everyone forgot where they stood and whether they were on the same side. Everyone was just happy that someone had broken through the limits of the human body and achieved an impossible goal. It was like the Olympic Games where people pursued higher, faster, and stronger. Every time a world record was set, everyone was happy for the athlete who broke it. Hijichu's hands gripped the railing of the ship tightly, and his heart was in his throat. Seeing that Gunyanji had successfully escaped, his tense expression slowly relaxed. Send a lifeboat down and tell the emergency doctor to bring a first aid kit to the boat and be on standby. Hijichu said as he turned around and followed her into the lifeboat. Gunyanji raised her head above the surface of the sea and closed her eyes. She sniffed and took a few deep breaths of fresh air. She had never realized that naturally existing fresh air made people feel so good. It was truly the ultimate reliance of life. A small, fully equipped lifeboat stopped not far from her. Hijichu stood on the lifeboat and reached out to her. Nyenji, come here. Gunyanji blinked. Brother Zay had been unconscious for so long, so he really needed immediate medical attention. Otherwise it would be bad if his brain was damaged. Brother Zay was so smart and capable. She still had a lot of computer and internet knowledge to ask him. Gunyanji paddled to the small lifeboat where Hijichu was. She climbed onto the side of the lifeboat and said to Hijichu, Professor Brother Zay fainted at the bottom of the sea. I don't know how he's doing right now. Can you do me a favor and lend me your doctor to take a look at him after I rescue him? Gunyanji's large, lively eyes darted between Hijichu and the doctor with the large first aid kit on his back. Hijichu's smile faded and he reached out to her this time. Come up. You've been in the sea for too long. It's not good for your health. Gunyanji clung to the side of the boat and begged softly with a smile. Okay? Professor can you do me a favor? Hijichu hadn't seen Gunyanji act coquettishly in front of him in a long time. His heart was filled with excitement as he leaned forward to grab her wrist. Exerting strength with both arms, he actually managed to pull her out of the water. Gunyanji needed Hijichu's help, so she obediently allowed herself to be dragged onto the lifeboat. The doctors and nurses behind Hijichu quickly stepped forward and wrapped Gunyanji in a large blanket. Gunyanji said anxiously, I still have to go down to save people. Professor could you please wait? Since you can come out, why would I need you to save me? Hijichu glanced at her coldly and turned to his subordinates. Get someone to go down to the sea immediately. Did you see the place she came out from? If we dive over there, we'll be able to enter the blue hole and save them. That way they could avoid the violet electric arcs on the surface of the blue hole. Those people had seen Gunyanji emerge from the bottom of the blue hole. Seeing that a little girl like her was fine, they were all grown men. It was even more unlikely that something had happened to her. A strong sailor was the first to dive into the water and swim towards the place Gunyanji had come out from. Then 2 or 3 sailors also dived into the sea and swam in that direction. Gunyanji was extremely grateful that people were helping her save people. She kept bowing and thanking them. Hijichu put his hands in his trouser pockets and couldn't stand it anymore. He pulled her over and placed her in front of him. His shimmering, sultry eyes were cold. Why are you thanking them? Would they have gone if I hadn't asked them to? Of course I have to thank Professor even more. Gunyanji quickly thanked Hijichu and coaxed him with sweet words. But I'm so close to Professor so it's too formal to thank him. They're not close to me. Although they're listening to Professor I'm still grateful that they were able to dive into the sea to save people. Hijichu looked at her big round eyes as she spoke and knew that she was trying to make him happy with her insincere words. However, the fact that she was willing to make him happy now was already much better than how she used to avoid him, wasn't it? Hijichu's expression relaxed slightly. He asked her, Are you hungry? Yes. How can I not be hungry? I'm so hungry that I can eat a Manchuhan imperial feast. Gunyanji gestured exaggeratedly and even used sign language. Hijichu was speechless. He turned around and ordered someone to bring a crab patty sandwich. Eat it and see if you like it. Gu Nianji's eyes were fixed on the people who had gone to the blue hole to save people. She took the sandwich from Hijichu and took a bite. Only then did she realize that it was her favorite crab patty sandwich. I really have to thank Professor He for finding such a delicious crab patty. Gu Nianji's eyes crinkled into crescents as she quickly used a small napkin to pat her hand and finished the small crab sandwich. She had just finished the crab patty sandwich and wiped her hands with a wet tissue when she heard a loud cry from the blue hole where she had just come from. Looking up, she saw that of the 3 sailors who had just gone into the sea to save people, 2 had already fainted and were being dragged out of the sea by the 3rd person. The man surfaced and used all his strength to call for help in their direction. Hijichu's people had already quickly gone into the sea and swam in that direction. In the end, not only did they fail to save people, but they also had to be rescued by others. The 3 sailors returned to the lifeboat, and the one who hadn't fainted told everyone about the situation in the sea. The 3 of us swam to the place where she emerged and dove into the sea, but the electric shock there was still very strong. The 2 of them swam in first, and as soon as they reached the border, they immediately fainted. I was behind them and saw that the situation wasn't good, so I didn't try. Otherwise, all 3 of us would have fainted and we would have died. The sailor who hadn't fainted continued to speak. As he spoke, he kept looking at Gu Nianji as if he thought she was just putting on an act. Hijichu's doctor examined the 2 fainted sailors and whispered to Hijichu, "They really fainted from the electric shock." He also glanced at Gu Nianji as he spoke. Everyone looked at the 2 strong sailors who had fainted, then at Gu Nianji. They all fell silent. Gu Nianji stood up, the smile on her face fading. Without a word, she put on her diving mask and said to Hijichu briefly, "Professor He, please wait for me for 5 minutes. I'll bring Brother Zay up immediately." "No." Hijichu objected sternly, but Gu Nianji had already jumped into the sea before him. She quickly dove underwater and swam towards the place where she had come from. "Nianji, Nianji, come back, come back." Hijichu clung to the low side of the lifeboat and screamed at the top of his lungs. His expression was one of rage and sorrow, and it was an indescribable sadness to anyone who saw him. The nurse who had been secretly observing him couldn't help but feel a lump in her throat. She turned around and wiped away her tears. "Stand by, I'll go down and take a look." Hijichu opened his jacket to reveal the diving suit inside. He held on to the side of the boat and fell into the water. He also swam in the direction Gu Nianji had gone. His subordinates also quickly jumped into the water to protect him as they swam in Gu Nianji's direction. Gu Nianji returned to the place where she had come from and swam around. She didn't see anything out of the ordinary, so she couldn't understand why the 2 sailors had fainted from the electric shock. When she had come out, she had also been in pain from the electric shock, but it hadn't reached the point of fainting. It was much worse than the violet electric arcs on the surface of the sea. Gu Nianji pursed her lips and found the 3-meter pass that she had come out from. Without the slightest hesitation, she dashed over with her eyes open. It was still the same pain from the electric shock. It went deep into her bones as if someone had taken a fine needle and poked it out of her bone marrow. She was in so much pain that her entire body trembled. The seawater around her rippled because of her trembling and expanded outwards. However, despite the pain, Gu Nianji didn't faint from the electric shock. She once again successfully made it back to the waters of the blue hole. Hua Xiaoheng was carrying Zhao Liangzi and waiting for her not far away. Seeing that she had successfully gone out and come back in, Hua Xiaoheng's heart finally relaxed. "Thank you for your hard work." Gu Nianji swam to Hua Xiaoheng's side, and Hua Xiaoheng signed to her. Gu Nianji shook her head with a smile. She had already calmed down and pretended as if nothing had happened. She extended her hand to Hua Xiaoheng and signed, "Give Brother Zay to me. I'll take him out. Professor He is here. He brought a lifeboat, a doctor, and medicine. Brother Zay will be treated as soon as he gets up." Hua Xiaoheng was slightly taken aback when he heard that Hijichu was here again. However, when he heard Gu Nianji say that Hijichu had brought a doctor and medicine, the little bit of displeasure in his heart immediately vanished. With Hijichu's help, Zhao Liangzi would definitely be fine. Hua Xiaoheng held Gu Nianji's shoulder and patted it. He put Zhao Liangzi down and swam with her to the place where Gu Nianji had come in. When they arrived at the narrow and long body of water that was more than 3 meters high, Hua Xiaoheng stood on a limestone reef and carefully placed Zhao Liangzi in the crook of Gu Nianji's slender arm. "Thank you." He thanked her. Gu Nianji quickly shook her head. "Brother Zay has been so good to me. I won't let anything happen to him." "Hua Xiao, you don't have to thank me." She carried the unconscious Zhao Liangzi and turned around to protect his head and shoulders in her arms. She used herself as a net to protect Zhao Liang's head and heart. Then, she kicked off with both legs and closed her eyes as she rushed towards the invisible electric fence. She wasn't sure if it was because she had an extra person in her arms this time, but the strength of the electric shock was actually much stronger than when she had first entered. Gu Nianji bit her lip and endured the excruciating pain. She forced Zhao Liangzi out of the range of the blue hole's electric fence without a word. He Jichu arrived soon after and dragged Zhao Liangzi away from her arms. He sent his own people to the lifeboat. He's out. He's really out. The lifeboat was filled with cheers. The doctors and nurses quickly performed a physical test on Zhao Liangzi and gave him first aid. The rescue work was carried out in an orderly manner. Meanwhile, Gu Nianji turned around to swim towards the blue hole's waters. He Jichu grabbed her and said angrily, "You still want to go? Look at you." Even her lips were bruised from biting. It was obvious how painful it was. But Gu Nianji's purpose for coming here was to save Hu Xiaoheng. How could she give up? "Professor He, I'll be right back. I've already done so much. You won't let all my previous efforts go to waste, will you?" Gu Nianji chuckled, but the stubbornness in her eyes was unquestionable. He Jichu's grip tightened. Gu Nianji pried him away again, one finger at a time. "Professor He, I'll be fine." She turned around and swam back to the blue hole's waters. After entering and exiting twice, Gu Nianji's body was almost at its limit. The pain increased exponentially. She was only worried that Hu Xiaoheng would discover her condition, so she tried her best to act as if nothing had happened. As soon as she swam back to the blue hole's waters, she reached out to Hu Xiaoheng and jumped into his arms. The two of them hugged each other tightly in the blue hole's waters. There was the joy of surviving a disaster, but there was also the happiness of having the person they loved by their side in the most dangerous of times. "Hu Xiao, let's go." Gu Nianji tugged at his arm and gently opened her arms to hug him. This time she was hugging Hu Xiaoheng, so Gu Nianji no longer had any reservations. Her chest was soft, so Hu Xiaoheng also opened his arms to hug her. The two of them maintained their hugging posture as they slowly swam to the electric fence. They were almost at the place where she had entered and exited twice. Gu Nianji opened her eyes and looked at Hu Xiaoheng. Suddenly she scuttled upwards and hugged Hu Xiaoheng's head tightly against her chest. Hu Xiaoheng was momentarily dazed when a pair of softness suddenly blocked his face. At that moment, Gu Nianji endured the excruciating pain and used all her strength to drag him out of the blue hole's electric fence. Hu Xiaoheng only felt like his arm was being pricked by needles, but the feeling quickly disappeared. The texture of the seawater was also obviously different. Hu Xiaoheng looked up and saw that the seawater above his head was azure blue. The raging bluish-purple electric arcs were no longer there. He was overjoyed. He hugged Gu Nianji with one arm and quickly paddled with the other. His soles stepped repeatedly on the soles of his feet to float up to the surface. This is the first update of 3,800 words. Remind me about the monthly votes and recommendation votes. Do you still need to update at 7 p.m.? The group chat was endless. Thank you for subscribing, tipping, and voting. Chapter 512. They stayed at the bottom of the blue hole for nearly 3 hours. If Gu Nianji hadn't rushed over and brought them backup oxygen tanks, then relied on her own strength to send him and Zhao Liangzi out of the shackles of the blue hole's electric fence, Hu Xiaoheng knew he would have been dead. He Jichu saw that Hu Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji had finally emerged from the water and sighed deeply. His slender arms quickly paddled to them, and he and Hu Xiaoheng clustered around Gu Nianji as they boarded their lifeboats. "How is little Zhe?" Hu Xiaoheng saw Zhao Liangzi lying on a simple medical stretcher as soon as he boarded the lifeboat. Zhao Liangzi's diving mask had been taken off and replaced with an oxygen mask. His face was pale, but it didn't look as bad as Hu Xiaoheng had imagined. Hu Xiaoheng put Gu Nianji down from his arms and pulled off his diving mask. He walked quickly to Zhao Liangzi without looking back. "Is little Zhe okay?" Hu Xiaoheng asked the doctor and nurse next to him with concern. "How is he? When will he wake up?" The doctor looked at Hu Xiaoheng, then He Jichu, and waited for He Jichu to nod before saying to Hu Xiaoheng, "You guys came up in time. If he had been unconscious for a while longer, he would have been disabled. The brain was deprived of oxygen for too long and had a fatal effect on intelligence." Hu Xiaoheng nodded firmly. "Thank you, doctor. Please treat him well no matter the cost." "We will. We will definitely help Mr. He to the end." The doctor thought he was He Jichu's guest, so he was very polite to Hu Xiaoheng. Hu Xiaoheng smiled and continued to ask about Zhao Liangzi's condition. He took out his phone to contact Yin Shixiang. When he boarded the lifeboat, Hu Xiaoheng's first target was actually Zhao Liangzi. Gu Nianji curled up in a corner of the lifeboat and couldn't move. She watched Hua Xiaoheng leave her. No matter how strong she was, she couldn't help feeling sad for herself when she saw Hua Xiaoheng's back. But she didn't want Hua Xiaoheng to see her injuries, so she couldn't blame anyone, let alone Hua Xiaoheng. He must have thought she was fine, so it was normal for him to be concerned about Zhao Liang's condition first. Feeling conflicted, Gu Nianji closed her eyes. She decided that out of sight, out of mind. She understood the logic in logic, but when it came down to it, she found that she could not remain indifferent. That's how relationships work. Without reckless impulses, without caring about gains and losses, and without all the twists and turns in one's heart, it can't be said to be true love, right? He Zhichu boarded the lifeboat, and his subordinates quickly handed him a large dry towel. He Zhichu took it and wiped his hair. He looked around and saw Gu Nianji curled up on the floor in the corner of the lifeboat. She was still wearing a diving mask on her face, and her dusty clothes were very inconspicuous. He Zhichu walked over and knelt on one knee in front of her. He reached out and gently removed the diving mask for her as he said, "Why are you still wearing this? Why don't you take it off yourself?" Gu Nianji didn't have the strength to stop He Zhichu from taking off her diving mask. In fact, she couldn't even lift a finger. She could only try her best to smile. He Zhichu removed the oxygen mask for her, and when he saw her face, he froze. Her small face was completely pale, but her lower lip was bruised, and there were obvious bite marks and broken skin bleeding. The corner of her lip had already started to swell. He Zhichu's expression darkened, and he quickly reached out to check Gu Nianji's pulse. Under his fingers, Gu Nianji's pulse beat very weakly. She was barely breathing, but she was hanging on by a thread, and her life force seemed to be faintly discernible. He Zhichu's fingers began to tremble. He let go of Gu Nianji's wrist and squeezed her hand. Gu Nianji's hand had always been very soft, so soft that it was boneless. But now that He Zhichu was holding her hand, what he felt was not softness but weakness. A weakness that had no strength at all. He Zhichu's heart ached. He leaned forward and carried Gu Nianji horizontally, wanting to quickly turn her to the ship for treatment. Hua Xiaoheng turned around to see He Zhichu carrying Gu Nianji. He frowned unhappily and walked over to stop He Zhichu. He asked calmly, "Professor He, what are you doing?" He Zhichu looked at him and said coldly, "Since you've put her down, you have no right to care about her anymore." Hua Xiaoheng stopped in his tracks and looked at He Zhichu quietly. After a while he nodded. "I owe Professor He a favor this time. I'll remember it. But Nianji has me to take care of, so you don't have to worry about her. Give her to me." He reached out to He Zhichu as he spoke. Gu Nianji lay in He Zhichu's arms. She was so tired that even breathing felt like a burden. She didn't have the energy to pay attention to the tension between the two men. Going in and out of the electric fence around the Blue Hole's waters had really tired her out. The intense pain had severely depleted her energy. She couldn't even speak. Her head rested weakly on He Zhichu's shoulder, and she leaned against his chest. She didn't want Hua Xiaoheng to see that she had bitten her lips until they were purple. She heard the hidden meaning in He Zhichu and Hua Xiaoheng's words, but she really didn't have the energy to deal with the two of them anymore. Gu Nianji closed her eyes and sighed softly. He Zhichu was very worried about Gu Nianji's condition. Seeing that Hua Xiaoheng was still standing in front of him, he felt a thorn in his heart. He said coldly, "Don't you see what happened to Nianji because of your recklessness? How can you face her? She risked her life to save you." Hua Xiaoheng looked down at Gu Nianji, who was lying in He Zhichu's arms. He said calmly, "I know what I'm doing. Nianji will be fine. If something happened to her, he would never agree to let her save him." "She'll be fine? What do you mean?" He Zhichu was furious. His aloof face was filled with anger, and his shimmering almond-shaped eyes were cold and murderous. He looked at Gu Nianji, who was paralyzed in his arms, and said sternly, "What do you mean she'll be fine? She's not dead, but that doesn't mean she won't be in pain." Gu Nianji's nose ached and tears were about to fall. She wasn't dead, but she was really in pain. Although she didn't agree with many of He Zhichu's methods in the past, this time He Zhichu's words deeply hit the weakest part of her heart. "Do you know what it feels like to be continuously shocked by high-voltage electricity? Mr. Hua, have you tried it before? If you haven't tried it, don't say such things in front of me." He Zhichu's expression became even colder. "Move." Hua Xiaoheng didn't move. He still spread his hands, and this time he said to Gu Nianji, "Nianji, come here. This is the second update. Remind me about the monthly votes and recommendation votes." The group chat was endless. Chapter 513. This time Hua Xiaoheng spoke, but Gu Nianji didn't respond. She was still lying motionlessly in He Jichu's arms with her head facing inward. Of course she couldn't move even if she wanted to. Previously in the sea she had completely held on. People could always explode with energy that they didn't even know they had in times of danger, let alone Gu Nianji. But after rescuing Hua Xiaoheng and Zhao Liangzi, she couldn't hold on anymore. Her entire body was like a deflated balloon. From Hua Xiaoheng's perspective, Gu Nianji's posture was particularly jarring. There was a sense of resistance to him, and this was something he couldn't tolerate or accept. Nianji. Hua Xiaoheng raised his voice slightly and took a step forward. He directly reached out to pull Gu Nianji out of He Jichu's arms. He Jichu hugged Gu Nianji even tighter and refused to let go. He glared at Hua Xiaoheng. Try moving again and I'll immediately have someone throw you out. The lifeboat wasn't very big and He Jichu had brought a lot of people. If he really wanted to throw Hua Xiaoheng out, Hua Xiaoheng would be outnumbered no matter how capable he was. Gu Nianji originally didn't want to care, but now that she heard He Jichu and Hua Xiaoheng were about to fight, she anxiously turned her head and weakly said, "Don't." When she turned her head, Hua Xiaoheng finally saw her face clearly. Her pale, bloodless skin was as fragile as the first snow in early winter. It melted in his hands, but it was summer in Central America. Where did the snow come from? Therefore it was even more thrilling. Her plump and beautiful lips were bruised, and there were 2 obvious small teeth marks. It was obvious she bit herself. The corners of her lips were broken and swollen. Half of her face was slightly deformed. She looked like a completely different person from the Gu Nianji he saw a few hours ago. She looked like she had been slapped hard in the face 17 or 18 times. Hua Xiaoheng's heart suddenly sank and he instantly understood. Gu Nianji was also injured. Moreover, looking at her pale and bloodless face, listening to her weak voice, her internal organs should have been severely injured. Was it because she had been electrocuted when she went through the electric fence in the Blue Hole's waters? So her physique wasn't so abnormal that she wasn't afraid of the high-voltage electric fence around the Blue Hole? She was just worried that he wouldn't let her save him, so she had been forcing herself to endure it, pretending as if nothing had happened, and using the diving mask to hide from him? Hua Xiaoheng's mind raced, and in the blink of an eye he understood most of Gu Nianji's thoughts. After all, she had grown up with him. She understood him and he understood her even more. However, it was a habit he had developed over the years on the battlefield. He would always pay attention to his own soldiers and comrades at the first moment. This had already become a habit that was deeply ingrained in his bones. After confirming that Gu Nianji was fine, his focus had been on Zhao Liangzi. Zhao Liangzi had fainted at the bottom of the sea because of him. As his superior, his commander, and the person he had saved, Hua Xiaoheng only wanted to know Zhao Liangzi's condition immediately. Only by knowing that he could recover could Hua Xiaoheng calm down. So he had neglected Gu Nianji just now. Gu Nianji glanced at Hua Xiaoheng, closed her eyes and said one more word. "Tired? Get out of the way." He Jichu roared at Hua Xiaoheng again. "I want to take her to the ship for emergency treatment." Hua Xiaoheng didn't insist anymore and quietly moved aside. He Jichu carried Gu Nianji and quickly walked past him. The lifeboat had already reached the bottom of the ship, and rope ladders and chairs were lowered from the boat to take He Jichu and Gu Nianji up first. Then Zhao Liangzi, the doctors and nurses, and finally Hua Xiaoheng and He Jichu's subordinates. Gu Yanran watched the situation on He Jichu's side from her own yacht. Although she didn't see the tension between He Jichu and Hua Xiaoheng, she saw Gu Nianji save Zhao Liangzi from beginning to end. She couldn't understand it. The electric fence around the Blue Hole was the masterpiece of her father, Gu Xiangwen. The project was huge and ingenious. No one knew the key to it, not even Gu Yanran. Therefore, after Gu Xiangwen and his wife's accident, the electric fence around the Blue Hole was basically abandoned. Because no one knew where the switch was and no one knew how to activate it. Gu Yanran was already surprised enough when the electric fence suddenly activated this time, but she was even more surprised that someone was able to survive the trap of the electric fence. Yes, Gu Yanran didn't know the principle of the electric fence and how to activate it, but she knew the power of the electric fence. That was because after Gu Xiangwen built the electric fence, he told his family more than once during dinner about the amazing functions of the electric fence. Also, when Gu Xiangwen was alive, Gu Yanran had seen the power of her father activating the electric fence with her own eyes. Logically speaking, it was something that even she didn't know and couldn't overcome. How could Gu Nianji overcome it at such a young age? Gu Yanran thought about it uneasily. Seeing that He Jichu and his people had already boarded the ship, she casually ordered, "Contact Mr. He and tell him that I want to visit Mr. Hua and Miss Gu." See how they are. Her housekeeper immediately contacted Hijichu. Hijichu boarded his ship and carried her straight to the best medical room on the ship. He called the doctor who had examined Zhao Liangzi earlier over and said with a dark expression, "Hurry up and examine her. See if we need to send her to the United States for emergency treatment." The doctor was frightened by Hijichu's expression and quickly took out a full set of medical equipment. He called his best assistant to examine Gunyenji together. From her breathing rate to her heartbeat as well as her internal organs, they would have done a CT scan immediately if there was one on the ship. Wu Xiaoheng didn't follow them in. He stood alone outside the medical room with his hands behind his back and watched the busy situation through the glass window. Hijichu wore a white sterile medical gown and a mask. His entire body had been disinfected and sterilized. He stood next to the doctor and watched them do the examination. The advanced medical equipment ensured that the examination was fast and accurate. 10 minutes later, the preliminary health examination results were out. The doctor looked at the results and said to Hijichu with a strange expression, "Mr. He, this lady is just tired. She'll be fine after some sleep." Looking at Mr. He's expression, he thought the lady was seriously injured and had hidden injuries and was about to die. The doctor kept criticizing Hijichu for making a mountain out of a molehill and said, "If there's nothing else, I'll go see the gentleman over there. His condition is more serious and he needs to wake up immediately." He was talking about Zhao Liangzi. Hijichu turned to look at him, his shimmering almond-shaped eyes expressionless. "Really? She's fine? No other hidden injuries? And no other illnesses?" He emphasized the word, internal injury, as he was extremely worried. "No, I can confirm that this lady is very healthy. She's just severely exhausted and needs to rest in bed for a few days." The doctor answered Hijichu's words with great professionalism. For some reason, when Hijichu heard the doctor's words and knew Gunyenji's health was fine, he didn't sigh in relief. Instead, he felt even more upset. He waved his hand. "You can go out. I'll sit here for a while." Gunyenji had already fallen asleep. The bruises on her lips were still there, but the bite marks had faded a little. He could imagine that by tomorrow the injuries on her face would be mostly healed, not to mention her body. Hijichu sat in front of Gunyenji's bed and cradled his head with both hands. His heart ached unbearably. It was all his fault that she became like this. Wu Xiaoheng waited outside the infirmary. When he saw the doctor come out, he quickly asked in English, "May I ask how the lady inside is doing?" The doctor saw that Wu Xiaoheng actually spoke authentic Oxford English and liked him. He smiled. "Don't worry, the lady is just very tired and severely exhausted. She needs to rest in bed for a few days. If she wants to, give her a few injections of glucose to replenish her energy. If she doesn't want to, she doesn't have to." The doctor also spoke Oxford English. Wu Xiaoheng carefully confirmed with the doctor again. "Really? She's really fine? No hidden injuries? No other illnesses?" The doctor laughed and shook his head. "Your question is exactly the same as Mr. He's. No, I still have to answer that there's nothing wrong with her body. It's just that she's a young lady after all. She saved 2 grown men from the bottom of the sea. It would be strange if she wasn't exhausted." The doctor had also seen the flashing electric arcs with his own eyes. He felt that if he had been electrocuted, he would have gone to God for sure. Only this lady was lucky enough to be blessed by God to be able to successfully save people. And may God bless her. If we're talking about serious injuries, that gentleman is even more serious. I'm going to see him. The doctor drew a cross on his chest and nodded to Wu Xiaoheng before leaving to see Zhao Liangzi's condition. Wu Xiaoheng stared at the infirmary for a while before reaching out to open the door. He hesitated but didn't go in. It was a sterile room inside. He hadn't been sterilized, so he couldn't go in. He crossed his arms and turned to lean against the wall next to the infirmary door. His expression was calm as he silently thought about what had happened. Suddenly his phone rang. When it was quiet all around, the ringtone was particularly abrupt. Wu Xiaoheng put on his Bluetooth headset and immediately straightened when he heard it was Yin Shixiang. "How is it? Is the helicopter here?" "It's here, Wu Xiao. I'm on the helicopter. Aren't you on the 4-story ship in front of us?" Yin Shixiang's voice was accompanied by the rumbling noise in the background. It was probably the sound of the helicopter's propellers. "Yes, I told you just now. I'm on Hijichu's ship." Wu Xiaoheng put the phone away and turned to knock on the door. Hijichu looked up and turned to look at him. Wu Xiaoheng pushed the door open and said calmly, "My helicopter is here. I'm taking Yanji away." Hijichu stood up and walked to the door. He also said calmly, "You can go, but Yanji can't. This is the first update of 3,000 words. A reminder for the monthly votes and recommendation votes. There will be an extra update at 7 p.m. The group chat is full. Thank you for subscribing, tipping, and voting. My New Year's wish is to be able to save the draft. Chapter 5:14. Professor He, you're a law professor, so you know more about personal freedom than I do. Xiaoheng clasped his hands behind his back, his voice calm and even. His gaze fell on Gun Yanji, who was sleeping in the infirmary, and a trace of regret and heartache flashed across his eyes. Yijichu put his hands in his trouser pockets. The corners of his mouth curled into a slightly mocking smile. Personal freedom? Mr. Hua, I haven't pursued the matter of you imprisoning Yanji for the past 7 years, and now you're talking about personal freedom? We imprison Yanji? Professor He, is there something wrong with your wording? Hua Xiaoheng turned to look at Yijichu coldly. Professor He, you're not related to Yanji, so what right do you have to say something like that? At least I'm still her guardian. Ah, you're her guardian? Who gave you the right? Did you give it to yourself? Did you ask her parents? Did you ask her parents for permission? Yijichu continued to sneer. You can't even take someone else's pet for yourself, let alone a living person like Yanji. You know Yanji is a living person too? Then why didn't you ask her and forbid her from leaving with me? Hua Xiaoheng didn't want to argue with Yijichu. To him, arguing was a waste of time and energy and wouldn't solve any problems. He never argued with people, even if he beat them until they couldn't move, he wouldn't argue with them. You want to ask her? Sure, she's injured now, so you can ask her after she's healed. Yijichu pretended to close the infirmary door. Mr. Hua, I won't see you out. Wait. Hua Xiaoheng extended his arm to stop Yijichu from closing the door, and calmly pointed out the fallacy in Yijichu's words. The doctor just told me Yanji is fine. Professor He, you know it's a serious crime to deliberately fabricate facts and give false testimony, right? Yijichu crossed his arms, his voice even colder. So what? Mr. Hua, are you saying that as long as Yanji is fine, you can forget about throwing her away after using her today? Yanji must be blind. Only someone like you would have feelings for me. Hua Xiaoheng's eyes narrowed, but it happened so quickly that even Yijichu didn't notice the change in Hua Xiaoheng's expression. He squinted at Hua Xiaoheng coldly and said, What is it? Speechless? You have a guilty conscience. That's between me and Yanji. You don't have to worry about it, Professor He. Hua Xiaoheng paused, but in the end he still held back and did not say anything more infuriating to Yijichu. But this sentence alone was enough to make Yijichu vomit blood from internal injuries. His face instantly paled, and he glared at Hua Xiaoheng with eyes that looked like they were about to spit fire. Hua Xiaoheng took a step forward. Yanji must come with me. But he turned to look at Yijichu. When she recovers, she'll still continue her studies with Professor He. This was the biggest concession Hua Xiaoheng could make. If it weren't for the fact that Yijichu and Gun Yanji were related, Hua Xiaoheng would have cut off their relationship a long time ago. No matter how much he doted on Gun Yanji, he would never allow a man with ulterior motives to continue being her tutor. The corners of Yijichu's mouth twitched as he watched Hua Xiaoheng stride past him towards Gun Yanji, who was on the other side of the hospital bed. Yijichu tried to hold back but found that he couldn't. He took his hands out of his trouser pockets, clenched them into fists, and threw them at the side of Hua Xiaoheng's face. Yijichu's movements were so fast, and his fists were like the wind. Hua Xiaoheng's entire focus was on Gun Yanji, so he couldn't dodge the punch. By the time Yijichu realized it, Yijichu's fist had already smashed into Hua Xiaoheng's face. Hua Xiaoheng instinctively stepped to the side to avoid Yijichu. At the same time he stretched out his arm to block Yijichu's incoming fist. He said coldly, Professor He, are you sure you really want to fight me? Fighting was his profession, whether it was with a gun or his fists. I can't beat you when it comes to talking. But if you want to fight, Professor He, you should go back and think about it carefully before challenging me. Hua Xiaoheng said this and pushed Yijichu hard. Yijichu didn't expect Yijichu to be so strong as well. He twisted his arm and actually managed to block Hua Xiaoheng. The two of them were in a stalemate at the door, neither willing to take a step back. At that moment Yijichu's subordinate came over and said, Mr. He, Miss Gu wants to visit us and says she's sorry for hurting everyone. Yijichu and Hua Xiaoheng let go at the same time. Hua Xiaoheng walked into the infirmary without looking back. Yijichu glared at him and turned to his subordinate. Let her come here. Hua Xiaoheng walked to Gun Yanji's bed and stood still. He bent down and tentatively touched Gun Yanji's forehead. The temperature of her forehead was normal, but her face was pale, making the purple color on her lips even more shocking. Hua Xiaoheng couldn't help rubbing her lips with his finger. Her soft petal-like lips were now ravaged like this. Hua Xiaoheng could almost imagine how Gu Nianji had endured the pain to come and go from the electric fence again and again. She had also pretended to be fine and forced a smile in front of him. His heart throbbed strangely. A tremor that almost penetrated his soul made his hands tremble, but his lips were tightly pursed. His expression was calm and composed, not letting any emotion show. Gu Nianji didn't sleep well. She seemed to hear someone making noise. Hua Xiaoheng's hand touched her forehead and she woke up. She quietly opened her eyes a little to see who was in front of her. It was actually Hua Xiao. Gu Nianji quickly closed her eyes again and didn't dare to look again. Hua Xiaoheng had just asked her to go over. Although she didn't have the strength to go over herself, it was the first time in her heart that she resisted him and his orders. When Gu Nianji closed her eyes, her eyelids trembled. Hua Xiaoheng immediately saw that she was awake. He retracted his hand and looked at her silently. After a while he said, "Big Xiong is here with the helicopter. Do you want to go back with me?" Gu Nianji couldn't pretend to be asleep anymore, but she didn't know how to face Hua Xiaoheng. She still felt wronged. She pouted and slowly rolled to her side with her back to Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng saw her childish behavior and curled his lips. However, he wouldn't admit that he secretly sighed in relief. She was still willing to be spoiled and act shamelessly. It was better than completely ignoring him. "Go back with me, okay?" Hua Xiaoheng bent down and whispered in Gu Nianji's ear. His voice was gentle and his posture was also very humble. This was also the first time he had bent down to coax someone like this. Gu Nianji wasn't so easy to coax this time. However, she still knew her priorities. This time she had come to Barbados on a mission, not a vacation. Therefore she had to go with Hua Xiaoheng. However, Hua Xiaoheng didn't use this to pressure her. "Okay." Gu Nianji also only replied with one word. She opened her eyes and looked at Hua Xiaoheng. Her eyes were calm and indifferent, and there was no longer the joy and excitement that burst from the depths of her heart whenever she saw him. Hua Xiaoheng quietly bent down and picked her up. Leaning her against his chest, he turned to walk to the door of the infirmary. As soon as he walked out, he saw He Jichu and Gu Yanran and the others coming over. This was the second update. A reminder about the monthly votes and recommendation votes. The group chat was endless. Chapter 5:15. "Miss Gu, are you okay?" As soon as Gu Yanran saw Hua Xiaoheng walk out with Gu Nianji in his arms, her expression became anxious. She jogged over to Hua Xiaoheng and stood still. She carefully looked at Gu Nianji in his arms and asked, "Do you need a full-body checkup? It's not easy to save two people from the electric fence in a place like the Blue Hole." Her expression was extremely concerned, and her tone was even more careful, as if she was afraid Gu Nianji would be angry if she said something wrong. Gu Nianji couldn't just ignore Gu Yanran's concern. She moved slightly in Hua Xiaoheng's arms and was about to speak when Hua Xiaoheng's large hand pressed against the back of her head. She immediately couldn't move and could only keep her head in Hua Xiaoheng's arms. "Miss Gu Nianji saved two people from the Blue Hole. How could she be okay? Didn't you see that I was about to take her back for a full-body checkup?" Hua Xiaoheng answered Gu Yanran on Gu Nianji's behalf. He Jichu raised a brow and stood to the side with his hands behind his back. He didn't expose Hua Xiaoheng's nonsense. Gu Yanran turned to look at He Jichu and asked in confusion, "Mr. He, don't tell me you don't have a doctor on your boat? Miss Gu's situation is urgent. I don't know if she can hold on until we go back to see a doctor." He Jichu's lips twitched as he crossed his arms lazily. "I actually want Nianji to stay but someone won't allow it. What can I do?" "That's not right." Gu Yanran looked at He Jichu with a reproachful expression and shook her head. "There are priorities. Nianji's current physical condition is the most important. Mr. Hua, Mr. He, don't tell me you two don't know this? Hurry up and get a doctor to check on Nianji. If there really isn't a doctor, I have one on my boat. I always bring doctors and nurses out to sea just in case." Even Gu Yanran brought her own doctors and nurses out to sea. He Jichu didn't even need one. He Jichu saw that Gu Yanran had made it clear, so he shrugged nonchalantly and spread his hands. "Actually, the doctor on my ship has already examined Nianji, but Mr. Hua probably wants to go back for another examination. Already checked? That's good, that's good." Gu Yanran nodded quickly. "Is there a problem? If you need any help, just tell me." He apologized profusely. "I'm so sorry, it's all my father's fault. Back then, I didn't know what to do with the electric fence. I told him it wasn't good, but he didn't listen. After his accident, the electric fence hasn't been activated for many years. I didn't expect Mr. Hua to be so unlucky. I don't know how it was triggered. Gu Nianji buried herself in Hua Xiaoheng's arms and quietly listened to Gu Yanran. She understood two things. Firstly, the electric fence was indeed set up by Gu Xiangwen. My father is really amazing. Secondly, Gu Yanran knew nothing about the principles behind the electric fence. Really? Gu Nianji had her doubts for the time being. 3. There must be a reason for the electric fence to suddenly activate. Gu Nianji didn't believe that it had been triggered by chance. An electric fence of such scale and advanced technology was set up in the blue hole in the high seas, and you're telling me that it can be triggered at will? This Gu Yanran must not be that good at physics, Gu Nianji kept complaining in her heart. Listening to Gu Yanran talk about her father and the electric fence, He Jichu didn't say anything. His gaze fell on the back of Gu Nianji's head as if he could see flowers blooming. Hua Xiaoheng listened attentively. After listening to Gu Yanran, Hua Xiaoheng nodded. It's really strange. What about the blue hole now? The electric arcs are still there, right? They're still there. I don't know how to turn them off. Not many people in this world can understand my father's things. Gu Yanran said this with a hint of pride. Indeed, with a father like Gu Xiangwen, she had the right to be proud. Hua Xiaoheng was a little distracted. He looked down at Gu Nianji in his arms. This is Gu Xiangwen's biological daughter, right? Inheritance was really a scary thing. She was also incredibly smart and capable, and she was also tenacious. Once she set her mind on something, she would never turn back. Even if her head was broken and bleeding, she would only smile and say it was fine. Mr. Gu is really amazing, Hua Xiaoheng said meaningfully. I'll go visit another day. He was talking about going to the hospital to check on Gu Xiangwen's condition. Gu Yanran understood and nodded firmly. Of course. I'll await your arrival. With that, she took another step forward and moved closer to Hua Xiaoheng. She stood on her tiptoes to look at Gu Nianji, who was in his arms. Hua Xiaoheng let go, and Gu Nianji was finally able to turn her head from his arms to look at Gu Yanran. Gu Yanran immediately smiled. Nianji, are you really okay? That's great. She tilted her head and reached out to Gu Nianji. Nianji, you were really amazing today. No one has ever survived the electric fence that my father installed. How did you do it? I actually still have some questions that I don't understand and wanted to ask you. I'll also invite you to my house as a guest. You must come. Gu Nianji blinked and tried hard to speak. After a long time, she could only squeeze out a sound. Gu Yanran nodded with a smile. She looked up at Hua Xiaoheng and said, Mr. Hua, I haven't asked you yet. Why didn't you tell me that you wanted to dive in the blue hole? This area looks calm and peaceful. It's called a diving mecca, but it's actually quite dangerous. Fewer and fewer people have come here to dive in the past few years. Hua Xiaoheng grunted. It was a spur-of-the-moment idea. I wanted to use this opportunity to go out to the sea and have fun. I didn't expect the blue hole to be so dangerous. The ocean has always been a place that humans haven't fully explored. The blue hole is even more so. Mr. Hua, you've learned from your mistakes. If you want to come and have fun in the future, just tell me in advance. I'll make arrangements for you guys and this won't happen. Gu Yanran said with a smile. Her face was as warm as the summer sun. She then said to Gu Nianji in a teasing tone, Nianji, you can come too. I'll welcome you too. Gu Nianji pursed her lips and forced a smile. She ignored Gu Yanran and leaned her head on Hua Xiaoheng's shoulder tiredly. Her expression was as calm as still water. At that moment, Hua Xiaoheng's phone rang again. At the same time, they heard the rumbling sound of a helicopter hovering above them. Yin Shixiang had arrived with the helicopter. Hua Xiaoheng nodded to He Jichu first. Professor He, I owe you a favor this time. I'll host a feast for you when we return to the Huaxia Empire. Of course, He Jichu didn't care about Hua Xiaoheng's meal, but Gu Nianji was looking at him eagerly. He couldn't say a word of rejection. He Jichu snorted and said coldly, We'll talk when we return. Gu Nianji immediately smiled and nodded at him. She then closed her eyes and leaned into Hua Xiaoheng's arms to rest. Hua Xiaoheng nodded to Gu Yanran again. Miss Gu will be leaving first. He carried Gu Nianji and strode away. When they arrived at the empty space on the top floor of He Jichu's ship, Zhao Liangzi had already woken up and was lying on a stretcher. Several people were putting rings on him to pull him onto the helicopter. Yin Shixiang stood beside him. He was usually used to bickering with Zhao Liangzi, but today he was unusually quiet. Zhao Liangzi had just woken up and was also exhausted. He didn't want to talk, so he only greeted Yin Shixiang and closed his eyes to rest. Hua Xiaoheng walked over with Gu Nianji in his arms. Yin Shixiang quickly came to greet him. Hua Xiao, are you okay? Nianji, you're amazing. Yin Shixiang already knew that Gu Nianji had rescued Hua Xiaoheng and Zhao Liangzi. He admired her from the bottom of his heart and looked at Gu Nianji with reverence. Gu Nianji was speechless and didn't want to talk. Like a little ostrich, she buried her head tightly in Hua Xiaoheng's arms. Hua Xiaoheng hugged her tightly and put rings on himself. He tugged on the steel rope, and the people in the helicopter immediately activated the rings to pull them up. The helicopter that Yin Shixiang had arranged was large and stable. Chen Lai and Yi Zitan came to greet them as soon as they boarded. Hua Xiaoheng sighed in relief when he saw Chen Lai. You're here too? Big Xiong told me. Chen Lai looked disapproving. Hua Xiao, you really made a big fuss this time. How did you end up like this? What's wrong with Nianji? Can't she walk anymore? Why do you keep carrying her? Give her another test. Hua Xiaoheng carefully placed Gu Nianji on a stretcher in the cabin. He Jichu's ship doctor checked her and said she's fine, but I'm still worried. He had thought she was fine at first, but when he saw her exhausted and thought about the power of the electric fence in the Blue Hole's waters, he realized he had indeed let his guard down. Chen Lai nodded. Of course you have to check her. Right, General Ji is waiting on the other side of the phone. Hurry and explain to him. Hua Xiao, you're already a major general. You can't do something like this again. General Ji was so worried he didn't sleep the whole night. He was afraid something would happen to you. Hua Xiaoheng quickly stood up. Then look after her. I'll go take the call. Gu Nianji opened her eyes and looked at Hua Xiaoheng. Her gaze was deep and quiet like a deep well. Hua Xiaoheng sensed Gu Nianji's stare and paused. He reached out to pat her head. Be good. I'm going to take the call. I'll be right back. Chen Lai almost burst out laughing. He looked up at the sky and muttered to himself, the phone is just a meter away. Do you have to? Gu Nianji only needed to look up to see Hua Xiaoheng's back as he took the call. But she didn't say anything. She glanced at Chen Lai again, then at Yi Zitan, who was busy with her head down. Her gaze was provocative. Chen Lai immediately understood the meaning of Gu Nianji's gaze. He shuddered and didn't dare to make fun of her anymore. He looked away and found medical equipment to examine Gu Nianji again. Gu Nianji relaxed her body and closed her eyes, but her mind kept turning. She recalled everything that had happened in the past 2 days and suddenly thought of something. When she asked He Jichu for leave, she didn't say where she was going. How did He Jichu know she was in Barbados? And he even brought doctors and nurses on a big ship to help her at the most critical moment. This is the first 3,000-word update. A reminder for the monthly votes and recommendation votes. Today is Monday, so recommendation votes are very important. There will be an extra update at 7 p.m. The group chat is busy. Thank you for subscribing, tipping, and voting. Chapter 5:16. Yin Shixiang had asked the Cuban Air Force to send a rather old helicopter. It was a former Soviet Union model, but it was sturdy and durable. Its flight speed was very stable, but it was a little noisy. Yin Shixiang sat next to Gu Nianji and rubbed his ears. All Russian things are like this. They don't have so many bells and whistles. Although it doesn't look good, it's safe. Gu Nianji's thoughts were interrupted by Yin Shixiang. She glanced at him and pouted slightly. What's wrong? Look at your mouth. It's big enough to hang an oil bottle. Yin Shixiang tapped her lips and asked in surprise, Huh? Why do you look like you're hurt? Who bit you? Gu Nianji finally couldn't help but roll her eyes. She grinned at Yin Shixiang and showed her little white teeth to show that she bit him. Yin Shixiang looked at the tiny teeth marks and thought it probably wasn't Hua Xiaoheng. He grinned and asked her, Then why did you bite your own lips? Are you craving meat? If you do, tell your brother Xiong. We'll go eat barbecue after we get off the plane. Barbecue. Gu Nianji rolled her eyes 180 times in her mind. The barbecue experience at sea had left a deep impression on her. She felt she would never want to eat barbecue again. Hua Xiaoheng was standing not far from them on the phone. He was using the special line on the helicopter. Although the method was old, there was almost no possibility of it being eavesdropped. Xiaoheng, what the hell happened? General Ji was burning with anxiety on the other end of the phone. How did something happen? Didn't you say you were going to get Gu Xiangwen back? Did someone stop you? Hua Xiaoheng thought about it carefully and felt it was a possibility. He was also very interested in Gu Xiangwen's electric fence. He wanted to use this opportunity to get information from Gu Yanran to see how much she knew or where Gu Xiangwen did his research back then. It would also help them find information. Chief, this is still under investigation, Hua Xiaoheng replied carefully. Hua Xiaoheng replied cautiously, Also, we've made new discoveries. I hope we can bring back some new things in addition to bringing them back successfully. General Ji knew Hua Xiaoheng had found something good, but he didn't ask over the phone. He only sighed in relief and said, "That's good. That's good." He had to complete the mission at all costs. This way I can answer to those people. General Ji was also under a lot of pressure when Hua Xiaoheng got into trouble in Barbados. The Supreme Military Council, the Senate and Prime Minister Do's cabinet all questioned him, demanding an answer as to why Major General Hua had deviated from his schedule during his overseas visit. When General Ji saw Prime Minister Do's interrogation request, which was akin to leaking secrets, he cursed in his study for half an hour. "Xiaoheng, let me tell you, if you receive a letter of inquiry from the cabinet, ignore them and forward it to me. I'll deal with them." General Ji had always been very protective of his subordinates. Now that he had the confidence, he decided to take Prime Minister Do down a notch. Hua Xiaoheng asked in surprise, "Prime Minister Do hasn't stepped down yet?" He remembered that before he left the country, Prime Minister Do's collusion with the Yamaguchi-gumi had already been exposed. How could it be that easy? He adamantly refused to resign. If the Senate wanted to remove him from office, they would have to call a grand jury, which would take at least a year and a half. Also, there's only 1 month left until the election, so there's no need for us to bother. We'll just wait for him to step down during the election. General Ji angrily pounded the table. Hua Xiaoheng was also speechless for a moment. He tapped his fingers on the small square table. Do the voters know about his affairs? If they don't, then elect him again. Don't worry about that. His affairs are everywhere now, online and newspapers, on TV. It's all over the place. Old Do is a tough man too. He's under so much pressure from the public, but he doesn't care and continues to be the prime minister. General Ji shook his head ruefully. But these political matters have nothing to do with us, so we don't have to worry about it. You just have to bring him back to me. Roger, Chief. Hua Xiaoheng quickly straightened and stood at attention to receive the order. Putting down the phone, Hua Xiaoheng walked back to Gun Yanji's side. Seeing Yin Shixiang chatting and laughing beside her, he sat down and adjusted the thin blanket on her body. Can't sleep? Gun Yanji looked down and shook her head. She flipped over to lie down with her back to Hua Xiaoheng and Yin Shixiang. Yin Shixiang scratched his head. Something wasn't right. Yanji had always listened to Hua Xiaoheng. Why was she rebelling today? He glanced at the two of them and stood up. He muttered, "I'll go see how little Zay is doing." He then walked away. But there was only so much space on the helicopter. Where could he go? He only sat down a few steps away. Hua Xiaoheng sat next to Gun Yanji and whispered to Chen Lai, who was checking Gun Yanji's body data. What did you check? Are you sure there are no problems? Chen Lai looked at the data and shook his head. There are no problems at all. She's just too tired. But according to you, the electric arcs in the blue hole's waters were so strong that Yanji's body must have been affected. She needs to rest for a few days. Hua Xiaoheng nodded. Chen Lai's opinion was almost exactly the same as the doctor on He Jichu's side. However, the doctor didn't seem to know about Gun Yanji's special constitution, so Hua Xiaoheng was still worried. He could only confirm that Gun Yanji was really fine by letting Chen Lai check her again. Gun Yanji closed her eyes and listened to Hua Xiaoheng and Chen Lai whisper about her situation. She was a little unhappy. Hua Xiao was asking so many questions to confirm that she was fine. What did he mean? She was fine, but the damage she had suffered was real, and it hurt a lot. This kind of pain was the same as when she had donated bone marrow to Hua Xiaoheng's mother, Song Jining. It was the kind of pain that went deep into her bones. The only thing she was better at than others was her tolerance. But what kind of advantage was that? Gun Yanji was extremely depressed. She laid face down and looked at the tattered coating of the helicopter. After looking at it for a while, she actually slowly fell asleep. When she woke up again, she had already returned to the Huaxia Imperial Consulate office in Barbados. It was her own room. The night light in the room was on, and the warm yellow light had a calming effect that warmed people's hearts. Gun Yanji opened her eyes and looked around. It seemed like she was the only one there. She slowly sat up in bed and lifted the thin blanket covering her body. She put on her shoes and got out of bed with her head heavy. However, she had only taken 1 or 2 steps when her legs gave out and she fell to the carpet with a thud. Hua Xiaoheng stood up from the bedroom sofa and walked to her side to pick her up. Why are you awake? Where are you going? Gun Yanji was shocked. Hua Xiao? You're here too? Why didn't I see you? I'm on the sofa over there. Hua Xiaoheng moved to the side, and Gun Yanji saw the round sofa in the middle of the bedroom. The back was relatively high and Hua Xiaoheng was sitting there. If he hadn't said anything, Gun Yanji really wouldn't have known he was sitting there. Gu Nianji snapped back to reality and pushed Hua Xiaoheng's hand away. She said calmly, "It's late. Hua Xiao should go rest. I'm fine here." "Really?" Hua Xiaoheng couldn't help laughing. "Why are you pouting so high if you're fine? If you say you're busy, I'll definitely be here with you. If I say you're busy, then what's the point?" Gu Nianji looked away, unable to get rid of the grievance in her heart. This is the second update. Let me remind you about the monthly votes and recommendation votes. Today is Monday, especially the recommendation votes. The group chat is full of kisses. Also, the password for the red packet is the words under the password red packet, at the end of the chapter. For example, today's password is Major General wishes the new year. Do you understand? Chapter 517. Hua Xiaoheng was speechless for a moment. He looked down at Gu Nianji's aggrieved expression and pursed his lips. "Where are you going after getting up?" "To the bathroom," Gu Nianji said sullenly. "Put me down. I'll go by myself." Hua Xiaoheng still carried her to the bathroom door and turned on the lights for her before putting her down. Gu Nianji opened the bathroom door and walked in without looking back. She slammed the door shut and locked herself in the bathroom. She walked to the sink and looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't react for a long time. Gu Nianji used to read that people would be enlightened in life and death situations. Many things that she couldn't accept before would be accepted and let go. And after this experience, had he already gotten over it and let it go? But she didn't want to accept and let go. Gu Nianji reached out her finger and wrote on the mirror in front of her. She thought she was doing it unconsciously, but she realized she was still writing Hua Xiaoheng after she finished writing. Even she was afraid of herself and her feelings, let alone Hua Xiaoheng. He must have been forced into a corner by her, right? Gu Nianji didn't want this to happen. She didn't want to see herself become more and more dependent on Hua Xiaoheng, and she didn't want to demand more and more from him. If this continued, she was worried that their feelings would be exhausted one day. She stayed in the bathroom for nearly an hour and still didn't know what she should do. She couldn't bear to let go. But who knew what she would become if this continued? Passionate feelings could completely change a person until they were unrecognizable. She didn't come out for a long time. Even someone as patient as Hua Xiaoheng couldn't take it anymore and knocked on the door. "Nianji? Nianji? How are you? Are you asleep?" He was worried that Gu Nianji had fallen asleep in the bathtub. This could be a big or small thing, but it was all very dangerous. Gu Nianji was still standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom. When she heard Hua Xiaoheng knock on the door, she snapped out of her trance and looked at herself in the mirror. She vaguely recalled Scarlett's famous quote from Gone with the Wind, "Tomorrow is another day." Yes, tomorrow. She would figure out how to get along with Hua Xiaoheng tomorrow. Opening the bathroom door, Gu Nianji said to Hua Xiaoheng seriously, "Hua Xiao, there's something I forgot to tell you. Do you remember Yamaguchi Yuko? This time she was the one who wanted your lives. However, she held Gu Yanran hostage and was killed by her. Her corpse fell into the sea." Hua Xiaoheng froze again. "Yamaguchi Yuko? Not Yamaguchi Aiko?" Gu Nianji said. "Maybe Yamaguchi Aiko and Yamaguchi Yuko are the same person." She remembered that Hua Xiaoheng and the others were pursuing Yamaguchi Aiko this time. They later found out that she had taken advantage of Prime Minister Do's situation to sneak out of the Huaxia Empire. Coincidentally, they met the woman who called herself Yamaguchi Yuko in the blue hole near Barbados. Comparing the two, it didn't take a genius to figure out the connection between the two. Yamaguchi Yuko probably wasn't dead, so Yamaguchi Aiko, who claimed to be the younger sister of Yamaguchi Yuko, and wanted to avenge her sister, couldn't stand. She didn't even know she gave herself away. Gu Nianji covered her mouth and yawned tiredly. "Okay, Hua Xiao, I've said everything I need to say. Aren't you tired? Go back to sleep, I'm so sleepy." Hua Xiaoheng's gaze followed her until she got into bed. He pulled the blanket over her and lay down with her back facing the outside of the bed. The bedroom lights were off and everything was dark again. Hua Xiaoheng stood quietly in the dark for a while before finally sneaking out. He wasn't sleepy at all when he walked out of Gu Nianji's bedroom. He could sense that Gu Nianji was in a bad mood and knew the reason. However, what could he do now that things had come to this? Saying all sorts of random sweet nothings to coax Gu Nianji might be able to make her happy, but he couldn't do it himself. Today, bowing to Gu Nianji and begging her gently was already the limit of what he could do. Hua Xiaoheng walked a few steps in the hallway and turned a corner to see Yin Shixiang leaning against the hallway wall with his arms crossed. "Chief." Yin Shixiang immediately saluted when he saw Hua Xiaoheng walk over. "Yeah." Hua Xiaoheng continued walking calmly as he asked, "Can't you sleep? What are you doing here?" I just went to see little Zay. He's much better. Yin Shixiang followed Hua Xiaoheng downstairs. Hua Xiao, are we going back to the hotel or staying here? Hua Xiaoheng stopped and thought about it before turning to look at Yin Shixiang. Do you want to go for a drink or two? Drink? Sure. Yin Shixiang's face lit up. I know the restaurant here has good rum. How about it? I also have a few good Cuban cigars. He winked and coughed twice before asking tentatively, Hua Xiao, I heard you quit smoking? Hua Xiaoheng patted his shoulder. Hand over the cigars and I won't kill you. Yin Shixiang immediately took out his personal stash and smiled obsequiously. Hua Xiao, here are the cigars. Please be magnanimous and let me off this time. Hua Xiaoheng grabbed his shoulder and pulled him to the bar of the restaurant on the first floor. Go find some rum. He lowered his head and skillfully cut off the cigar tip with a blade. He placed it on the silver cigar butt and held it between his fingers to take a deep puff. Yin Shixiang came out with the rum and saw Hua Xiaoheng sitting on the high stool opposite the bar. He propped his head up with one hand and held a cigar in the other. Smoke curled up from his fingers. He only stared at the cigar butt and didn't smoke much. Hua Xiao, are you in a bad mood? Yin Shixiang asked tentatively as he poured Hua Xiaoheng a glass of blueberry rum and pushed it over. The alcohol content wasn't high and was more like fruit wine. Hua Xiaoheng took a sip and shook his head. He calmly denied, No, I'm thinking about the operation the day after tomorrow. You mean going to the hospital to see Gu Xiangwen? Yin Shixiang perked up. But will little Zay recover the day after tomorrow? Zhao Liangzi was in charge of their operation and could be said to be the most important person under Hua Xiaoheng. If he didn't go, the effect of their operation would be reduced by at least half. Hua Xiaoheng put out the cigar in the ashtray and said calmly, Little Zay doesn't need to go out. It should be fine to be in charge here. In their line of work, they didn't even care about life and death, let alone fainting from lack of oxygen. That's true. Yin Shixiang nodded and also took a sip of rum. He puffed on the cigar and said emotionally, Hua Xiao and Yinji really opened my eyes today. She really put in a lot of effort. It's a pity that she didn't enlist with us. Hua Xiaoheng's movements paused for a moment, but he had always been calm and composed. He was as still as a mountain when he sat. Yin Shixiang was drunk again and didn't notice Hua Xiaoheng's subtle movements as he puffed. He said excitedly to himself, It's all thanks to her today. If it was me, Hua Xiao, you and little Zay would have been wiped out in the waters of the blue hole today. Really? Tell me about it. Hua Xiaoheng held his glass with one hand and looked calm. His long legs stretched out and his upper body leaned against the bar. He was indescribably relaxed. However, this deliberate state couldn't fool Yin Shixiang. He had been with Hua Xiaoheng for so many years and was very familiar with his emotional changes. After hesitating for a while, Yin Shixiang decided to help Gun Yanji. He poured Hua Xiaoheng another glass of rum and began to talk incessantly. Yanji was so anxious when I saw you guys fighting with the white yacht today. I locked her in the cockpit and took the AMR to fight them. But when I came back, Yanji actually turned the tables on me and locked me in. She ignored my objections and jumped into the sea to save you and little Zay on her own. There's such a thing? What happened after that? Hua Xiaoheng asked calmly. His fingers gripped the glass, his knuckles turning slightly white. I was so anxious at the time. I wanted to jump with her, but what about the ship? Without the ship, even if we won against the gunmen on the white yacht, we would still be buried in the sea. Also, I had full trust in you and little Zay at the time. I believed that you and little Zay would be able to handle any situation. I really didn't expect the Blue Hole's waters to have such incredible equipment. Yin Shixiang clicked his tongue. If it weren't for Nianji, the three of us would have failed miserably. Hua Xiaoheng took a sip of rum and replied calmly. What happened after that? The situation at the time was extremely dangerous. If it weren't for Nianji's quick decision to jump into the sea and risk being electrocuted to save you and little Zay, I would have had to wash my neck clean and go back to the military court to await the most severe punishment. Yin Shixiang said half-jokingly. Actually, if the most dangerous situation had really happened, Yin Shixiang would have chosen to send all the intelligence back to the Huaxia Empire and then die with Hua Xiaoheng and Zhao Liangzi. This was the camaraderie of life and death that they had built up over the years while carrying out missions. Hua Xiaoheng nodded and patted Yin Shixiang's shoulder. Nianji did well this time. You did well too. In the situation at the time, both of you couldn't jump into the sea at the same time. Nianji's water skills were better than yours, so it was better for her to save us than you to go. Hua Xiao, don't hit me in the face. You're humiliating me right in front of my face. Have you ever asked me how I feel? Yin Shixiang joked and tried to help Hua Xiaoheng relax. Hua Xiaoheng's lips twitched. I'm telling the truth. Can't we even tell the truth these days? Of course not. We can only say politically correct things. As for what the truth is, I've never seen it before. Yin Shixiang slapped the table and laughed. Why were Professor He and Gu Yanran there too? What a coincidence today. What a coincidence. Hua Xiaoheng took another sip of rum. His gaze was deep and unfocused. Nianji told me that the woman on the white yacht was Yamaguchi Yuko. She later killed her for kidnapping Gu Yanran. Her body fell into the sea in front of her. This is the first 3,000-word update. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. There will be an extra update at 7 p.m. The group chat is endless. Thank you for subscribing, tipping, and voting. Chapter 518. Yamaguchi Yuko? She really didn't die. Yin Shixiang nearly jumped up and knocked over the wine glass on the counter. Is it true? That Yamaguchi Aiko is actually Yamaguchi Yuko? Yamaguchi Yuko and Yamaguchi Aiko were both investigated by the Special Operations Forces, so Yin Shixiang immediately thought of this possibility. Most likely. Hua Xiaoheng calmly put down his glass and stood up. So we have to leave here as soon as possible and bring Gu Xiangwen back safely. Yin Shixiang understood what Hua Xiaoheng meant. Hua Xiao, you want to bring it forward? Yes. I'm only telling you that the operation the day after tomorrow is not a drill, but an official operation. Hua Xiaoheng finished speaking and strode away, leaving behind only a tall and broad silhouette that could bear all the heavy responsibilities in the world. Yin Shixiang sat alone at the dimly lit bar and carefully thought through the operation from beginning to end. He was surprised to find that there was no pressure at all to change it to an official operation. Also, because he had previously told Gu Yanran that he was going to visit her first, he had actually kept this from her as well. Ha ha ha, brilliant. Truly brilliant. Yin Shixiang's mood suddenly improved. He raised his glass and finished the rest of the bottle before returning to the guest room to rest drunkenly. The next day Gu Nianji woke up very late. She was only woken up because of He Jichu's visit. Professor He is here? Gu Nianji hurriedly got out of bed and dressed before rushing to the bathroom to wash up. She chose a sea blue silk dress that covered her complexion and came down to see He Jichu. He Jichu was sitting on the sofa in the corner of the living room, and Yin Shixiang was talking to him. Gu Nianji quickly glanced around and saw that Hua Xiaoheng was nowhere to be seen. She didn't ask and walked over to He Jichu with a nod. Professor He, I was just about to go look for you. I didn't expect you to come. He Jichu turned around and looked Gu Nianji up and down. He smiled. Nianji, how are you feeling? Do you still feel unwell? Gu Nianji's skin was snow white. Because she was physically exhausted, there was not a trace of blood on her face. However, the sea blue color only made her appear slightly fragile. Gu Nianji smiled as she spread her arms and twirled them around. See, everything is normal. I've made Professor He worry. He Jichu gestured for her to sit down. Don't let your guard down. You should rest for 2 days first. I'm here to see you and then I'll return home. Professor He, are you leaving? Gu Nianji sat down beside He Jichu. Why don't you stay for a few more days? He Jichu was acutely aware that Gu Nianji's attitude towards him was different from before. She was no longer avoiding him and treated him like any other friend. It didn't give him any special treatment, but he was happy because of this knowledge. Being able to make Gu Nianji treat him like a normal person was already his biggest reward this time. No, I decided to come here on the spur of the moment. There are still a lot of things to do at school, and I can't leave your senior brothers and sisters behind for too long. He Jichu said with a half-smile. He glanced at Gu Nianji and took the initiative to say, Are you wondering how I knew you were in Barbados? Gu Nianji smiled sheepishly. Will Professor He explain it to me then? Of course. He Jichu rested one hand on the back of the sofa and crossed his legs to lean against it. He looked at Gu Nianji. It's a very simple deduction. I had just helped you get the medical records and dental records of Gu Nianji, the youngest daughter of the Gu family in Barbados, when Mr. Hua came to Cuba for a visit. I knew at the time that he had an ulterior motive. Then Prime Minister Do's incident at the airport happened, and Gu Yanran rushed back to Barbados. Then you applied for leave in a hurry, and when I called you, your phone was already out of service. If I still can't guess where you went, then I'm not fit to be your mentor. Gu Nianji blinked and thought about it for a while, then said in confusion, Okay, even if you could guess that I came to Barbados, but how could you arrive at the blue hole near Barbados on time? Before they left, they had only told the embassy that they were going out to barbecue and fish for crabs. Hua Xiaoheng and his team's diving trip to the Blue Hole was a secret mission, so they hadn't told anyone. This was a difficult question to answer, and it was easy to make a mistake. Fortunately, He Jichu had already thought about how to answer this question before coming. This can only be a coincidence. He Jichu leaned forward calmly and picked up his coffee from the coffee table to take a sip. I was going to look for you, but I heard from the embassy that you went out to fish for crabs. I had my people check the whereabouts of all the commercial and private ships that went out to sea in Barbados today. I easily found the location of your Millennium Oda. Gu Nianji replied, "Oh, why are you looking for me, Professor He?" He Jichu stared at her, his eyes filled with her shadow. "I came to see if you needed any help. After all, I'm more familiar with this place." The He family was the underground godfather of South America, so He Jichu was indeed able to do whatever he wanted here. Gu Nianji nodded with conviction. She said sincerely, "Professor He, thank you so much. We really do need your help. If it weren't for you yesterday, we might not have made it back alive." "You're welcome. Nianji, you're so amazing. You would have made it back alive without me. But without you they wouldn't have made it back alive." As He Jichu spoke, he glanced at Yin Shixiang, who was listening intently. Yin Shixiang smiled sheepishly. "That's right. Without Nianji we would all be dead." "Brother Xiong, don't say that. You guys saved me several times in the past. I'm just returning the favor this time." Gu Nianji felt no pressure facing He Jichu and Yin Shixiang. She spoke and acted very casually. She didn't have to worry about whether her words and actions were pleasing or not. He Jichu's expression changed. "Nianji, did you encounter a lot of danger in the past? With Hua Xiaoheng's power he couldn't protect you." Gu Nianji quickly waved her hands. "No, I didn't encounter a lot of danger. I just got caught in the crossfire a few times. It was Hua Xiao, Brother Xiong and Brother Zhe who helped me out." "Really? For example?" He Jichu was very persistent and wouldn't let this question go. Gu Nianji was a bit embarrassed to say it. She stammered, Professor He, it was when I went on a graduation trip and ran into some robbers." "It's nothing." She had subconsciously concealed the fact that she had been drugged at Feng Yishi's birthday party. It wasn't because of anything else, but because it was a strange topic for a man to talk about. She wasn't that open about it yet. "When you graduated?" He Jichu frowned. "How come I've never heard of it? It was a long time ago and it was perfectly resolved. All the robbers were killed, the hostages were rescued and everyone was happy." Yin Shixiang interrupted. "Professor He, our Hua Xiao was personally involved at the time. Normally, this kind of case doesn't require someone of Hua Xiao's level to be involved." "Haha, that's true. So it was that incident. I heard about it once." He Jichu chuckled and looked at Gu Nianji. "Nianji, when are you coming back?" "I'll be leaving in 2 days." Gu Nianji brushed him off. She couldn't tell him the exact time because she didn't even know when she would be leaving Barbados. "Is that so?" He Jichu could tell she was brushing him off but didn't pursue the matter. "Okay then, I'll wait for you at school. You'll have to catch up on all the homework you missed." "Huh?" Gu Nianji couldn't help screaming. "No way, Professor He. You came all the way here just to give me homework." "You're right." He Jichu stood up. He was in a great mood. "I'll be going now. Call this number if you need anything. They'll do their best to help you." As he spoke, He Jichu handed a business card to Gu Nianji. The card was simple and had a decorative passion flower pattern around the edges. There was only a phone number in the center. "Thank you, Professor He." Gu Nianji hesitated but accepted the card. This incident had made her realize what it meant to rely on friends when she was away from home, so she didn't refuse He Jichu's kindness. It was better to be safe than sorry. Gu Nianji personally walked He Jichu out of the consulate. At the door, she ran into Hua Xiaoheng, who had just returned. He had just gotten out of an off-road jeep. He was wearing camouflage hunting gear and holding a shotgun. When he saw He Jichu and Gu Nianji walking down the steps of the consulate, Hua Xiaoheng squinted and walked over to greet them. "Professor He, you're here. Why don't you stay a bit longer?" "I'm going back to the Empire, so I came to see how Nianji is doing today." He Jichu was no longer as aggressive as the other day. He appeared gentle and refined. "Did Mr. Hua go hunting?" "Yeah, I went to the famous hunting grounds in Barbados to hunt some pheasants. I'm making soup for Nianji." Hua Xiaoheng turned around and took out a few plump grayish-black pheasants with their wings tied up from the jeep. He waved them at He Jichu. Gu Nianji's eyes widened and she couldn't help gulping. These were Guinea pheasants imported from Guinea, Africa. Real exotic wild game. They were perfect for nourishing the body. This is the second update. Reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. The group chat was endless. Thanks for subscribing, tipping, and voting. Chapter 519. Gunyenji had a deep impression of this wild pheasant, also known as guinea fowl, because she had eaten it once with Hua Xiaoheng and the others. She couldn't stop praising it, but it was a rare opportunity, so she had only eaten it once. Hua Xiaoheng saw that Gunyenji's gaze was attracted to the guinea fowl in his hand, and the corners of his lips curled up into a fleeting smile. He waved the guinea fowl at Yin Shixiang, who had just walked out of the main entrance. Big Xiong, take it to the kitchen. We'll have it for dinner. Okay. Yin Shixiang quickly walked down the steps with a smile and took the guinea fowl from Hua Xiaoheng's hands. He nodded at He Zhichu, who was looking at him sideways. Take care, Professor He. I'll see you back at the Huaxia Empire. He Zhichu looked away and smiled faintly. Okay, I'll see you back at the Huaxia Empire. Gunyenji followed He Zhichu down the steps and watched him get into the equally flashy custom-made bulletproof Cadillac limousine and drive away. She even waved reluctantly to see him off. Hua Xiaoheng watched from the side for a while and reached out to pull on her arm. Go back. Professor, he has already gone far away and can't be seen. Gunyenji pulled her arm back and tilted her head. Be polite. What does it matter if Professor he can't see? Do you think you can do whatever you want where others can't see? Hua Xiaoheng glanced at her and said calmly, yeah, being polite is a good thing. He then said to Yin Shixiang, who was staring at him and Gunyenji with wide eyes, what are you standing there for? Take it to the kitchen and clean it up. Kill the chicken and pluck its feathers yourself. I'll do it. Hua Xiao is going to cook personally? Yin Shixiang's eyes lit up. He didn't mind that Hua Xiaoheng wanted him to kill the chicken and pluck its feathers himself. If he had been ordered like that in the past, he would definitely have yelled, don't use a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. And then he would have been laughed at by Gunyenji. Now Gunyenji didn't reply. She only gulped, then silently turned around and walked up the stairs to the consulate. Yin Shixiang's eyes darted between Gunyenji and Hua Xiaoheng. Finally, he moved to Hua Xiaoheng's side and whispered. What's wrong with Nyenji? She's throwing a tantrum. Ignore her, Hua Xiaoheng said calmly as he followed Gunyenji. Yin Shixiang smacked his lips and mimicked Hua Xiaoheng as he muttered to himself. She's throwing a tantrum. Ignore her. Bureau Chief, your words are so impressive. If you had not followed at once, I might have believed it a minute longer. But now, I don't believe it even for a second. Yin Shixiang shook his head as he walked up the steps, just in time to see Qinlai huddled by the door, winking and laughing at him. Big Xiong, oh Big Xiong, your 250-watt light bulb's IQ is really touching. He couldn't help but laugh. He waved the guinea fowl at Qinlai. Dr. Chen, did you hear that? Look at how stubborn Hua Xiao is. He says, she's throwing a tantrum, ignore her. But he still follows her. I bet he went in Yenji's room. Qinlai laughed out loud and said, you don't know about that. Hua Xiao said, ignore her, because he wanted you to ignore her. Yenji has to be left for Hua Xiao to coax, understand? Don't get in the way. *CK. That works. Yin Shixiang was so shocked by Qinlai's interpretation that he was almost speechless. But after thinking about it, he also laughed and said, oh, that's true. The two of them chatted and laughed as they went inside. Yin Shixiang took the guinea fowl to the kitchen to personally clean it up. Qinlai had originally wanted to test Gunyenji's data again, but just as he walked to the corner of the hallway where Gunyenji lived, he saw Hua Xiaoheng really push the door open and enter Gunyenji's room. Qinlai couldn't stop smiling. He took his equipment and turned to test Zhao Liangzi. Gunyenji returned to her room and took out casual clothes. She was about to change out of the heavy seawater blue silk dress she had specially put on. She had just turned around with the clothes when she saw Hua Xiaoheng strolling in and closing the door behind him. Gunyenji raised a brow and drawled, Hua Xiao, you have to knock before entering? What if I'm changing? That's not good, don't you think? Hua Xiaoheng sat down calmly on the single-seater sofa under her bedroom window. He crossed his legs and propped one arm on the sofa armrest. He clenched his fist and rested it on his chin. He looked at her quietly and said calmly, go ahead and change. I'll see which one suits you better. Gunyenji. She glared at Hua Xiaoheng and was so angry she could barely speak. What's wrong? Are you sorry? Hua Xiaoheng stared at her steadily. He put down his legs and stood up from the single-seater sofa. He walked step by step towards Gunyenji. His footsteps were neither fast nor slow, and his posture was calm. But in Gu Nianji's eyes, there was an indescribable pressure. She hugged the clothes and took a few steps back. She couldn't help but warn, "Don't come over." "I said don't come over." Wu Xiaoheng heard her and actually stopped. He stood an arm's length away from her and looked down at her calmly. Although Wu Xiaoheng listened to her and stopped, Gu Nianji couldn't help but blame Wu Xiaoheng in her heart. He had never been so obedient before. Why was he so abnormal today? It was probably because her resentment was too obvious, or maybe Wu Xiaoheng knew her too well. Seeing the change in Gu Nianji's expression, the smile on Wu Xiaoheng's lips became more obvious. He nodded. "Okay, then I'll go back." With that, he turned to leave. Gu Nianji was even more shocked. She hugged the clothes and watched Wu Xiaoheng walk back. She wanted to ask him to stay, but she felt that it would be too embarrassing. But seeing him leave just like that, her heart was even more unsettled. Just as she was anxious, sad, angry, and disappointed, Wu Xiaoheng's footsteps stopped. He turned in another direction and walked back to the single-seater sofa under the window to sit down. Wu Xiaoheng had only taken a few steps, but Gu Nianji felt like she was on a roller coaster. She had crossed thousands of mountains and rivers in an instant. She felt a lump in her throat. Lowering her head, she hugged the clothes and walked to the bathroom without saying a word. The single-seater sofa Wu Xiaoheng was sitting on was between the bathroom door and the desk on the south wall of the bedroom. Gu Nianji walked past him in a hurry. Wu Xiaoheng suddenly reached out and grabbed Gu Nianji's wrist. He looked up at her. Gu Nianji didn't turn to look at him. She looked elsewhere and said in a muffled voice, "Let go." Wu Xiaoheng looked at her wrist. It was slender and delicate. He really couldn't tell that such a slender arm had been able to save two grown men from such a terrifying place like the Blue Hole. His calm heart suddenly skipped a few beats, and he pulled hard, causing Gu Nianji to stumble and fall into his arms. Wu Xiaoheng hugged her on his lap and held her neck. He lowered his head and kissed her deeply. Her curvy lips were still a bit bruised. It hurt when he sucked on them. Gu Nianji couldn't take it anymore. She slapped Wu Xiaoheng and struggled in his arms. She cried non-stop. "Don't be like this. You're so cold one minute and hot the next. I can't take it. Is it fun to tease me? Is it fun to see me worry about you? Don't go too far. If you push me too far, I don't want you anymore. I don't want you anymore." As she said, "I don't want you anymore," she clutched his shirt tightly and cried until she couldn't breathe. Wu Xiaoheng kissed her tenderly. No matter how she struggled in his arms or how she tore at him, he kissed her persistently. It was as if he wanted to use kisses to soothe her grievances and pain. The tip of his tongue gently slid over the bruise on her lips again and again. He traced the shape of her lips and pried open her teeth to enter her mouth. The tip of their tongues touched and stirred as they helped each other in times of need. Gu Nianji tried hard to push him away. She used her little tongue to forcefully push the tip of Wu Xiaoheng's tongue out. However, the moment she used force, Wu Xiaoheng's breathing became heavy and he kissed her even more forcefully. Her head was firmly held in place by him. She couldn't move. Her lips were forced to open and let him do whatever he wanted. Her tears kept falling and fell into their kiss. It was wet and salty. It seeped into her heart and had a different feeling. This was the taste of love, right? Gu Nianji became dizzy from his kiss. Her tears gradually stopped and she didn't resist anymore. She leaned into a comfortable position in his arms. Her lips were slightly raised. He sucked on them so she couldn't speak or argue. After a long kiss, both of them were panting. Gu Nianji sobbed from time to time and leaned into Wu Xiaoheng's arms. She was like a child who had been wronged and was looking for warmth in her parents' embrace. But if this person was the source of her grievances, what could she do? Wu Xiaoheng patted her back and wiped her face with a tissue from the desk. He lowered his head and rubbed the tip of his nose against hers. He whispered, "Still angry?" Gu Nianji snorted and buried her head in his arms. She said sullenly, "Don't think that this will be over with just a kiss and a hug. I'm telling you it won't be so easy this time." "Oh, then what else do you want to do?" Wu Xiaoheng said calmly. One of his hands was beginning to behave. Gu Nianji gasped and grabbed his hand. She was a little exasperated. "That's not what I meant. I can't do it." Do what?" Wu Xiaoheng held her hand lovingly. "What else do you want to do? Just tell me. I'll do it. In your dreams." Gu Nianji struggled with all her might. Wu Xiaoheng reluctantly pulled his hand out and hugged her tightly. "Then don't twist around my leg. Be careful not to accidentally fire your gun. Wu Xiao, where's your self-control? How are you going to carry out your mission like this?" Gu Nianji's taunting skills were on full display. Hua Xiaoheng straightened her dress that had been crumpled into a ball and leaned back on the single sofa. He propped his head up with one hand and squinted at her. His other hand caressed her slightly swollen lips. He smiled. Luckily I'm not your opponent. If the enemy had sent our Nianji, I'd have no choice but to surrender. Oh? Really? Am I that amazing? Gu Nianji was instantly flattered by Hua Xiaoheng's words. After being with Hua Xiaoheng for so long, this sentence could be ranked in the top 3 of Hua Xiao's Sweet Talk collection. This is the first update of 3,000 words. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. There will be an additional update at 7 p.m. The group chat is full of love. Thank you for subscribing, tipping, and voting. I hope for more subscriptions, more monthly votes, and more recommendation votes in the new year. Then I can update more. Chapter 520. Of course I am. Okay, you're not angry anymore? Hua Xiaoheng kissed her again, his tone so intimate it was like he was coaxing a child. Gu Nianji's eyes flashed and finally realized that Hua Xiaoheng was really coaxing her. The excitement from earlier faded instantly. She smiled sheepishly and shook her head. Leaning against Hua Xiaoheng's chest, she didn't say anything else. How could she have believed that Hua Xiao would surrender? That was more impossible than the sun rising from the west. However, Gu Nianji didn't argue with Hua Xiaoheng anymore. This time she clearly realized the difference between them. It wasn't just status and identity but also age and experience. She was still a student at 18, but in front of the 28-year-old Major General Hua Xiaoheng, she was as transparent as a crystal. She was no match for him now. Gu Nianji lowered her long eyelashes and thought about her own matters in silence. To Hua Xiaoheng this matter should be over. He didn't have that much time to spend on personal matters. Hua Xiaoheng patted Gu Nianji's back and whispered in her ear, "Visiting your father at the hospital the day after tomorrow is an official operation, not a rehearsal. I'll discuss the specific arrangements with you?" Gu Nianji perked up and got off Hua Xiaoheng's lap. Nodding, she said, "I'll go change and then you can go through the entire process. I have a small program that can input the various conditions of the operation into it and see if there's anything that can be improved." "Okay, no rush. Go change." Hua Xiaoheng was already in work mode. He stood up, "I'll go make guinea fowl for you first." Gu Nianji watched Hua Xiaoheng leave her room and sighed internally. She went to the bathroom to change. She took a shower as well. When she was in a bad mood, she would take a bubble bath and apply a soothing rose balm to soothe her mood. At the end of the day, she couldn't base all her emotions on others. Also, she had always been able to entertain herself and was rarely stubborn. Hua Xiaoheng busied himself in the consulate's kitchen for an hour and stewed the guinea fowl. He called Yin Shixiang over. "Big Xiong, let's go tell Nianji about the operation the day after tomorrow." They went to Gu Nianji's room. She had just come out of the bathroom and was wearing a bathrobe. Her hair was dripping with water as she dried her hair with a large white towel. She said to the bedroom door, "Is that Hua Xiao and brother Xiong? I just finished showering." "Wait a minute." Hua Xiaoheng and Yin Shixiang sat down in the living room outside the bedroom. Both of them took out their tablets and ran through their plans for the day after tomorrow. Gu Nianji blew her hair dry and came out. She sat across from them and listened attentively to their account of the operation. After speaking, Hua Xiaoheng looked at Gu Nianji. "Do you have any other questions? Do you understand?" Gu Nianji thought about it and asked, "Are you sure that as long as I reveal my identity, I'll be able to take Gu, my father, away?" "According to the rules and regulations of that hospital, yes." Hua Xiaoheng mused, "Our people collected some information about that hospital. It was rushed, so it might not be complete, but we still managed to investigate the rules and regulations very clearly. Yes, if they don't agree then either they or Gu Yanran are up to something." Gu Nianji took out her laptop and divided the operation plan into a few conditions. She typed it into a program she wrote and ran it. Pointing at the results, she said, "There's no problem on the surface, but if they have a backup plan we might fail." Gu Nianji took out her laptop and divided their plan of action into several conditions and entered them into a small program she had written. She ran it and pointed at the results. "On the surface there are no problems, but if the enemy has a backup plan and hidden conditions we might fail. That's why we have to prepare for the worst." Hua Xiaoheng clenched his right hand into a fist and rested it on his chin. He stared at Gu Nianji's laptop screen. "Nianji, give me a copy of the program. I'll study it tonight." Gu Nianji nodded with a smile. "I prepared it for you guys anyway. I didn't have time to give it to brother Zhe." Yin Shixiang clapped. "Nianji is amazing. Little Zhe has a successor. I'm so happy. Brother Xiong, don't say it if you don't know how to say it. If you use idioms again, Huashao will punish you. Gunyanji teased Yin Shixiang. Her mood was different from before. Huashaoheng thought she had thought it through. He packed his things and used a flash drive to copy Gunyanji's program. During dinner, Gunyanji finally had the chance to eat the tender guinea fowl. Wild pheasants could be domesticated, but they weren't as tasty as wild ones. This soup is too fresh. Gunyanji drank 2 bowls. Huashao, what kind of seasonings did you add? How can it be fresh if I add too many seasonings? Huashaoheng shook his head. I only added a little salt. That's the taste of the food itself? No wonder it's so delicious. Gunyanji praised it. She was so full she couldn't walk. She couldn't sleep right away. She wandered around the consulate and finally arrived at Zhao Liangzi's room. She pushed the door open and saw Huashaoheng sitting on the sofa in front of Zhao Liangzi's bed. He was writing something on his tablet. Gunyanji's eyes dimmed. Her hand fell on the door handle. She was stuck. Should she go in or not? As she hesitated, Qinlai walked over from behind and patted her shoulder. He smiled. Nianji, you came to see little Zhe? Why aren't you going in? Gu Nianji couldn't hide even if she wanted to, so Qinlai brought her into Chen Zhao's room. Huashaoheng heard the sound of the door and turned to see Qinlai bringing Gu Nianji in. What's the matter? Huashaoheng asked calmly. His gaze fell on Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji could only walk over and look at Zhao Liangzi on the bed. Is Brother Zhe better? Has he woken up? He woke up once, but the doctor said he's still unconscious, so he needs to continue to be monitored. Huashaoheng spoke slowly and carefully. Gu Nianji frowned. Why hasn't he woken up yet? It shouldn't take this long. He's fine. He's already woken up once in the past 2 days. Qinlai said it was unconscious. He still needs to rest for another 2 days before he wakes up consciously. Qinlai pushed the door open and walked in. Nianji, you're here? Are you here to see little Zhe? I just wanted to see if Brother Zhe had woken up. Gu Nianji followed Qinlai into Zhao Liangzi's room awkwardly. Yeah, he's not hypoxic anymore. He'll get better. Qinlai comforted Gu Nianji and patted her shoulder. Huashaoheng stood up from his seat and crossed his arms as he walked to the window. He waited for Zhao Liangzi's test results to come out. This was a very important prerequisite. Zhao Liangzi was crucial to the success of their operation. This is the second update. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. The group chat was endless. Thank you for subscribing, tipping, and voting. Chapter 521. There was a long hallway outside the infirmary. It looked empty with only Huashaoheng and Qinlai talking in front of the window. Huashao, do you want little Zhe to wake up soon and return to normal? Qinlai asked in a low voice, his expression very serious. Huashaoheng froze. What is it? Could it be that Ozawa's situation was critical? Didn't you say you were fine? He's fine, but he hasn't woken up yet. I'm worried that he might become a vegetable. Qinlai pushed his round glasses up the bridge of his nose, worried. Coma caused by oxygen deprivation affects the normal functioning of the brain. We still have too little research on the human brain, so no one knows what will happen. Maybe he'll wake up soon, maybe he'll never wake up. Huashaoheng stood silently in front of the window with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked out at the tropical night view of Barbados and thought for a while. He turned to look at Qinlai. Just tell me what you mean. That. Qinlai began to sweat under Huashaoheng's sharp gaze. He took out a handkerchief to wipe his oily forehead and finally stammered, Since Nianji is here, why don't we let her? Shut up. Huashaoheng mercilessly refuted Qinlai's suggestion. How many times have I told you? Nianji was not a mobile pharmacy. She was human. They were real people. Qinlai, you disappoint me. In your eyes, is Nianji no different from a lab rat? Huashaoheng had never spoken to Qinlai so righteously before. Qinlai's face turned red. He also knew that he shouldn't have suggested this, and his heart ached for Nianji. He had never thought of using her as a lab rat. But that was how things were. Once they encountered a problem, most people would want to take a shortcut. He would be a fool not to take the shortcut. Qinlai couldn't help but want to take another shortcut, under extreme circumstances. Huashao, I never thought of Nianji as a lab rat. I'm only telling you an option. With this option, little Zhe can recover immediately. Also, don't forget why the military put her in your hands. Don't disregard the national interest just because you have feelings for her. Qinlai, Nianji has never conflicted with the interests of the country. She is one of the people I want to protect. The national interest is the collective of our citizens. If there is a kind of benefit that needs to be achieved by sacrificing one's own people, then this kind of benefit is not worth it. Huo Xiaoheng's expression was solemn, and his back was as straight as a mountain. It was as if he would be the tall man holding up the sky even if it collapsed. Chunlai stared blankly at Huo Xiaoheng. He was so embarrassed that he couldn't speak. After a while he finally whispered, "Then what are you going to do if something really happens to little Zhe?" Nianji already felt very guilty. She feels guilty? Huo Xiaoheng froze. How did you know? It's obvious. You're doing this for her father. It's no wonder she feels guilty. Chunlai shook his head. Forget it. I won't say this to Nianji. I just want to discuss it with you. Since you don't want Nianji's help, then we'll leave it to fate. Quickly ask God for help. Maybe little Zhe will wake up soon. Huo Xiaoheng didn't say anything. He stood alone at the window in the hallway and pushed it open. He felt the humidity and heat of the Barbados summer night. Without batting an eyelid, he took out a cigarette from his trouser pocket and lit it. He took a drag and exhaled a long smoke ring. Chunlai returned to Zhao Liang's room and saw Gu Nianji and Yin Shixiang talking. He walked directly to Zhao Liang's bedside and looked at the data from the various instruments. Zhao Liang was stable and didn't seem to wake up anytime soon. Gu Nianji saw that Chunlai had arrived and there were 3 or 4 people in the room. She said to Yin Shixiang, "Brother Xiong, I'll go back first. You have to let me know as soon as Brother Zhe wakes up." "Yeah, maybe he'll wake up tomorrow. Go back to sleep." Yin Shixiang waved his hand. "We're going out the day after tomorrow. Pack your things." Gu Nianji nodded knowingly and said goodbye to Chunlai before leaving. Chunlai turned to look at her. He wanted to say something but didn't. In the end he didn't say anything. He smiled and said, "Nianji, go back and sleep well. Let me know as soon as possible if you're not feeling well." Gu Nianji agreed with a smile and closed the door on her way out. She looked up to see Huo Xiaoheng's tall and straight figure in the hallway. He gave her a sense of security. Gu Nianji couldn't help walking over. Huo Xiaoheng heard her footsteps and turned to look. Seeing that it was Gu Nianji, he put out the cigarette in his hand and tossed it into the trash can. He dusted his hands. "It's late. Go back to sleep." "Huo Xiao, is something on your mind?" Gu Nianji acutely sensed that Huo Xiaoheng's mood was a bit different. "No, I'm thinking about the day after tomorrow." Huo Xiaoheng flatly denied it. "If little Zhe is still weak by then, we need to find someone to replace him." Gu Nianji originally wanted to recommend herself, but she had to go to the hospital with Huo Xiaoheng. She couldn't stay here and mediate, so she didn't say anything. She only said to Huo Xiaoheng, "Then I'll go back to sleep. Huo Xiao, you rest early too." Huo Xiaoheng nodded and watched her leave. Huo Xiaoheng waited until she was out of sight before returning to Zhao Liang's room. As soon as he entered Zhao Liang's room, Gu Nianji also poked her head out from the corner of the hallway. She saw his back disappear in front of Zhao Liang's room. Huo Xiao actually went to Zhao Liang's room again. Did Brother Zhe's injuries relapse? Gu Nianji nervously returned to her room and ran her little program on her laptop again. She felt that there were still some problems, but she couldn't figure out what they were. She couldn't sleep either, so she took her laptop and went to Zhao Liang's room. Yin Shixiang was no longer there. Only Huo Xiaoheng and Chunlai were by Zhao Liang's bed. One of them was holding a tablet and scribbling away, while the other was lost in thought looking at the data from his device. Gu Nianji pushed the door open and asked quietly, "Huo Xiao, Brother Chen, are you guys hungry? Do you want supper?" Huo Xiaoheng turned to see Gu Nianji and rubbed his forehead. "Why aren't you asleep yet?" "I'm worried about Brother Zhe, so I can't sleep," Gu Nianji said honestly. She took her laptop and sat on the sofa opposite Huo Xiaoheng. "I want to stay here and help take care of him." "What can you take care of? You're not a medical professional." Huo Xiaoheng frowned and got up. "Let's go. I'll take you back to bed." Staying up late was not a good habit. Chunlai glanced at Huo Xiaoheng and said, "Nianji, go back to sleep." Even Big Xiong went back to sleep. "Besides, I'm here. Are you worried?" Gu Nianji shook her head. "I want to see Brother Zhe wake up as soon as possible." Huo Xiaoheng's brows furrowed. He raised his voice. "Nianji, I'm telling you to go back to sleep." "No, I want to wait here for Brother Zhe to wake up." Gu Nianji also raised her voice. She hugged her laptop. Although there was still a hint of timidity and vulnerability in her eyes, she had no intention of backing down. "I'll say it again. Go back." Huo Xiaoheng spoke unhurriedly, but his voice was getting louder. "I'm not going back. I want to wait here for Brother Zhe to wake up." Gu Nianji's voice was also getting louder. She hugged her laptop to her chest like she was hugging a shield to protect herself from Hua Xiaoheng's anger. Their argument not only stunned Qinlai, but even Zhao Liangzi, who had been sleeping soundly on the hospital bed, seemed to be startled awake. He groaned. So noisy, Qinlai immediately reacted. He pounced over in surprise. Little Zhe is awake. Are you awake? He was worried that he was still acting unconsciously like before. Zhao Liangzi made a few grunting sounds in his throat. He slowly opened his eyes and saw Qinlai's round black-rimmed glasses and round face. He closed his eyes in defeat and muttered, "Dr. Chen, don't be so close." "You scared me?" Qinlai laughed happily. "Ah, he's really awake. That's great. God bless us. Little Zhe is really awake." Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng, who had been arguing, heard him and looked over. Qinlai turned to them. "Hua Xiao, Nianji, come quickly. Little Zhe is really awake." Gu Nianji was the first to run over to Zhao Liangzi's bed. She asked anxiously, "Brother Zhe? Are you really sober?" The corners of Zhao Liangzi's mouth twitched. He slowly opened his eyes and said hoarsely, "I'm not really awake. I was talking in my sleep. Are you happy now?" It was great that he could be amused. Hua Xiaoheng walked over and stood behind Gu Nianji. He said to Zhao Liangzi, "It's good that you're awake. Are you hungry? I'll ask the kitchen to make you some supper." "Everyone's hungry. We all want supper." Qinlai winked at Gu Nianji with a smile. "I want some wontons." "What do you want?" "I'll just have some fruit." Gu Nianji had eaten enough for the night and wasn't hungry at all. Hua Xiaoheng turned on his Bluetooth headset and called Yin Shixiang over. When Yin Shixiang heard that Zhao Liangzi was really awake, he was so happy that he practically sprinted over. "You're amazing. You made everyone worry." Yin Shixiang happily punched Zhao Liangzi's bed, causing the spring mattress to shake a few times. Zhao Liangzi rolled his eyes. "Punch me again and I'll continue to faint." "Of course not." Yin Shixiang bowed in front of Zhao Liangzi, then busied himself preparing supper for everyone. The atmosphere in the ward became lively. Qinlai nodded to Gu Nianji. "Go back to sleep. Little Zhe is awake. He still needs to take a shower and then get his body checked. It's not convenient for you to be here." Gu Nianji finally left obediently. Hua Xiaoheng looked at Gu Nianji's back. His brows were still furrowed, but he didn't say anything and continued working. Now that Zhao Liangzi was awake, they could speed up their work. The next morning, Zhao Liangzi was already able to get out of bed. However, he didn't get out of bed. Instead, he sat on the bed and looked at Gu Nianji's program that Hua Xiaoheng had shown him. He clicked his tongue in praise. "Nianji is so amazing. I must take her as my last disciple. Having one disciple in this life is enough for me." He was a computer expert after all, so he was better than Gu Nianji, who had only studied part-time for a few days. He made some changes to Gu Nianji's program and was able to calculate more results. "Prepare according to these directions, and the success rate of tomorrow's operation will double." Zhao Liangzi explained his changes to Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji nodded as she listened. "I thought something was wrong. So that's how it is. Brother Zhe, thank you." Zhao Liangzi smiled and said, "This little program of yours is pretty good. Can you make it public?" "Brother Zhe, you're too kind. This program was originally written for you guys. It would be my honor if you liked it." Gu Nianji agreed immediately. She spent the entire day in Zhao Liangzi's room, discussing the program with him and the coordination of tomorrow's deployment. Zhao Liangzi would be in charge of the deployment. Hua Xiaoheng and Yin Shixiang spent the entire day outside making all sorts of preparations. They entrusted Zhao Liangzi to teach Gu Nianji about the various operational rules of the Special Operations Forces. Every operation has its own protocol. You have a good memory. You have to memorize everything in half a day. Is that okay? Zhao Liangzi basically made Gu Nianji memorize the month-long training content of the Special Operations Forces in an afternoon. Although Gu Nianji had a very good memory and high IQ, a full day of intensive training still exhausted her. After 9 p.m., Zhao Liangzi finished checking her progress and was satisfied. Gu Nianji was so tired she couldn't even keep her eyes open. She went back to her bedroom and fell asleep immediately. She didn't have the energy to think about romantic things anymore. Hua Xiaoheng finally finished all the preparations after a busy day. When he came back and heard that Gu Nianji had fallen asleep from exhaustion, he couldn't help smiling. He was still worried and went to Gu Nianji's room in the middle of the night to make sure she was fine and had only fallen asleep. The next day was the official day of the operation. Gu Nianji woke up very early. She had a good night's sleep last night and had recharged her energy. Today she felt full of energy. She silently recited the protocol in bed before getting out of bed to wash up. At 7 a.m. sharp, Gunyenji was dressed in a modified hunting suit with a wide belt around her waist. She actually had a gun hidden inside just in case. She wore half-tube military boots and a fashionable Hermes backpack, but she carried a bulletproof vest and various instruments and compasses. She wore a pair of large Prada floating cloud sunglasses that covered half her face. Her outfit was trendy but not eye-catching. This was because it was common in the wealthy areas of Barbados. People would only look at her otherwise. The hospital Gu Xiangwen was in was located in one of the wealthy areas of Barbados. The scenery there was beautiful. It was surrounded by mountains and faced the sea. There was only a winding mountain path that led in. It was quiet and safe. It would be extremely difficult to bring a person in a vegetative state out without anyone noticing. Therefore they chose to go through the legal process and bring Gu Xiangwen out. Gunyenji sat in Huo Xiaoheng's convertible jeep. She was getting more and more nervous about the upcoming father-daughter reunion. She couldn't help biting her fingernails as she watched the iron gates of the hospital get closer and closer. This is the first update with 4,000 words and a big chapter. Just a reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. Yesterday's second update, chapter 518, You Have to Shoulder the Burden, was revised. More than 500 words were added and all the mistakes and omissions were corrected. Everyone can download that chapter again to read it. Thank you for the reminder, meow meow. Mwah. There was an additional update at 7 p.m. Chapter 522. Huo Xiaoheng glanced at Gunyenji from the corner of his eye as he drove. Seeing her biting her nails again, he reached out with his right hand and pulled her fingers out of her mouth. He said unhappily, "Biting your nails again? Didn't I just cut them for you a few days ago?" Gunyenji smiled sheepishly and pushed Huo Xiaoheng's hand away. She placed it on the steering wheel and tilted her head. "Huo Xiao, drive properly. I can't control the steering wheel with one hand. I can drive without using my hands." Huo Xiaoheng looked away and looked at the iron gates of the hospital in front of him. He was still worried and reminded her, "We're here. Remember to be careful." Gunyenji nodded and perked up to get out of the car with Huo Xiaoheng. There was a sentry post in front of the iron gates to check passports. It looked like a military camp. Gunyenji was secretly surprised and followed Huo Xiaoheng closely to the sentry post. The sentry post was obviously a white mercenary. He was holding an AMR in his arms and wearing a pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses. When he saw Gunyenji, he whistled at her and said flirtatiously, "This girl is so cute. Do you want to go for a drink tonight?" Huo Xiaoheng quietly took a step forward and blocked Gunyenji behind him. At the same time, he showed the passports in his hand and spoke in English with a black accent. The white mercenary heard the English with a black accent and was impressed by Huo Xiaoheng. He quickly took the passports in to verify its authenticity and came out with a much more amiable smile. "Thank you, sir and madam. You can go in now." He pressed the button on the large iron gates, which creaked and automatically opened to both sides. Huo Xiaoheng and Gunyenji returned to their convertible jeep and started the car to drive in. According to the address Gu Yanran had given them, Huo Xiaoheng drove through the small paths of the hospital. On the way he saw some patients in hospital gowns walking in groups of 2s and 3s. There were also black nurses in snow-white nurse skirts pushing wheelchairs so that patients who couldn't walk could come out and get some fresh air. Gunyenji became nervous for no reason. She smoothed her hair and took out a small mirror to look at her makeup. She then adjusted her modified hunting jacket and wanted to take out lipstick to apply on her lips again. Huo Xiaoheng couldn't stand it anymore. He reached out and took the small makeup mirror from her hand. "Don't be nervous. That's your father." "What are you nervous about?" "I don't know, I'm just nervous," Gunyenji said coquettishly. "And I really don't remember them at all." "It doesn't matter if you don't remember as long as the law recognizes your status." Huo Xiaoheng rubbed her head. "Do you still remember what to do?" "Yeah, I remember everything." Gunyenji nodded and immediately repeated the entire protocol to Huo Xiaoheng. "All right, this kid was really nervous." Huo Xiaoheng didn't say anything else. He drove her to the building where Gu Xiangwen was staying. This was a small building located in the deepest part of the hospital. The outer wall was made of dark green glass, and it was very inconspicuous in the thick shade of the trees. Getting out of the jeep, Gunyenji nervously walked beside Huo Xiaoheng. She said she was nervous but she didn't tell him the whole reason. On one hand, she was indeed nervous about the upcoming father-daughter meeting, but on the other hand, she was nervous about Gunyenji's reaction. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. She was nervous because she didn't know what to do. but on the other hand, it was her first official mission with Hua Xiaoheng and the others. She was very worried that she would be a burden to them. Hua Xiaoheng's pace was calm as he strolled to the entrance of the small building to register. He showed his passport to the person at the registration desk. The person took it to verify its authenticity before returning with a smile. "Sir, please come with me." Hua Xiaoheng raised a brow and turned to hold Gu Nianji's hand. They followed the person into the small building. After passing through a long corridor, they arrived at the elevator. The person turned around and said, "Mr. Gu's ward has a special elevator that goes directly to his ward. Other elevators can't enter his ward. Come, you guys follow me this way." He led them to a small room next to the elevator. Pushing the door open, they discovered that there was another elevator entrance inside. The person stood directly below the elevator door and looked up at the camera above the elevator door with a smile. The camera flashed a blue light, and with a click, the elevator door opened. The person led Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji inside. So this elevator was identified by the human eye's iris. Gu Nianji couldn't help muttering, "With such a strict security system, the people here really don't know who Mr. Gu is." The elevator quickly brought them to the door of Gu Xiangwen's ward. The person knocked on the door and said to the camera at the door, "Someone is here to see Mr. Gu. There's a passport signed by Miss Gu." The person inside checked Hua Xiaoheng's passport again before opening the door to let Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji in. Hua Xiaoheng walked in front, his tall figure completely covering the slender Gu Nianji behind him. Gu Nianji, who had been restless the whole time, stared at Hua Xiaoheng's back. Her violently beating heart finally calmed down. "Mr. Gu is here. Do you want to come see him?" Gu Xiangwen's nurse was a chubby black middle-aged woman. Her smile was very simple and amiable. Gu Nianji had a good impression of her, so she became bolder. She walked quickly around Hua Xiaoheng to get to Gu Xiangwen's bed first. In front of her was a custom-made bed covered with equipment. And in the middle of those instruments of various sizes, there was a skinny man lying on the ground. Gu Nianji had never seen Gu Xiangwen's photo, but she subconsciously thought that he should look similar to her. She didn't expect that 7 years in a vegetative state had tortured Gu Xiangwen beyond recognition. All that was left was a pile of bones. This was her father? Gu Nianji's eyes widened as she looked at the man lying on the bed. She was extremely shocked. Was it because Gu Xiangwen was in a vegetative state that no one from the Gu family had looked for Gu Nianji for 7 years? Gu Nianji looked at him in a daze. Her nose felt a little sore, but she didn't want to cry. She turned to look at Hua Xiaoheng, asking him what to do next with her eyes. Hua Xiaoheng walked over and looked at the vegetative man on the bed thoughtfully. He asked the nurse some questions. "When did Mr. Gu come to your hospital? Have you been taking care of him all this time? How are his vital signs? Have there been any changes in the past 7 years?" Hua Xiaoheng's questions were specifically made up by Chen Lai for people in a vegetative state. The nurse smiled widely. "He's been in our hospital for more than 3 years. I heard that he used to be taken care of at home, but his condition worsened and he was sent to the hospital. Yes, I've been taking care of him since he arrived. As for his health, you'll have to ask the doctor. I'm just a nurse." Hua Xiaoheng nodded. This person's answer was similar to what he'd heard from Gu Yanran, so it shouldn't be false. Hua Xiaoheng asked about the details of Gu Xiangwen's treatment. Finally, he pointed at Gu Nianji and said to the nurse and guard, "Thank you for your care. I have an identification signed by the Barbados government to prove that she is Gu Xiangwen's youngest daughter, Gu Nianji. According to your hospital's regulations, only immediate family members can discharge Mr. Gu. We're here to discharge him." As soon as Hua Xiaoheng finished speaking, it was like a signal. Zhao Liangzi, who was far away at the Barbados consulate, immediately cut off all the hospital's external communications. From landlines to cell phones, everything crashed due to the sudden data overload. The Special Operations Forces had their own specialized satellite communication system, so cutting off the hospital's external communications did not affect Hua Xiaoheng and the others. They could still receive all the information from their Bluetooth headsets. At the same time, all the Special Operations Forces elites in South America were mobilized to control the hospital's external communications. Meanwhile, Gu Yanran, who had been in contact with the hospital and waiting for Hua Xiaoheng's news, suddenly realized that their internet connection to the hospital had been cut off. This is the second update. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. The group chat was silent. P.S. Chapter 518 of the second update was edited yesterday with an extra 500 words. It was written at 2 or 3 o'clock in the middle of the night due to a severe lack of sleep, so there were many mistakes and omissions. It was revised today and added some details. You can read it after downloading it again. Chapter 523. As soon as Hua Xiaoheng finished speaking, the nurse's smile froze on her face. After a while, she finally reacted and stammered, "Discharge? Discharge him?" "Yes, we're discharging him." Hua Xiaoheng was concise. "My people are going to the hospital to complete the paperwork now. Please make way, we need to pack his things." As Hua Xiaoheng spoke, the people outside had already received their orders. They brought the Barbados government's legal identification, Barbados passport, and proof of immediate family to the hospital's inpatient department to complete the discharge paperwork for Gu Xiangwen. The people in the inpatient department were stunned by the documents. They didn't want to complete the discharge paperwork, but they didn't dare to refuse. After all, they had all the documents. What could they do? Rules were rules, and Gu Yanran's words had to be handled according to the rules. Please wait. We'll go verify the documents." The people in the inpatient department stuttered as they snuck into the room to call Gu Yanran. Gu Yanran had left a phone number there. If there was an emergency, they could call that number directly to find her. Although the people in the hospital didn't know who the number belonged to, they had tried a few times in the past, and their problems would be solved as soon as they called it. But this time, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't get through. Hua Xiaoheng's people waited outside for more than 10 minutes and couldn't help but knock on the counter when they saw the person leaving and not returning. Where is she? Why is it taking so long to verify the documents? Should we go to the government to check again? The people in the inpatient department dawdled for almost half an hour but still couldn't get through to the number Gu Yanran left behind. The people outside were urging them, so they had no choice but to let them go according to the rules. Otherwise, it would be illegal detention. The people in the inpatient department slowly walked out and began the discharge paperwork for Gu Xiangwen. Meanwhile, Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji began packing in Gu Xiangwen's room. From Gu Xiangwen's breathing apparatus to his daily clothes, they packed everything that could be taken away. The nurse stood at the side rubbing her hands and kept saying, "He's not recovered yet. Where are you taking him?" In just half an hour, Gu Yanran's people were like ants on a hot pan. They were panicking like ants on a hot pan. "Should I report this to eldest miss? Can't you check what's going on? We've already sent people over but we haven't heard back yet." These people didn't know that the people they had sent had already been subdued by the elites of the Wuxia Imperial Special Operations Forces in South America. They were locked in a small, empty room and would only be released when the operation was over. When they finally ran out of ideas and went to report to Gu Yanran, almost 40 minutes had passed. "What? You can't get through to the hospital? Even the internet is down? Can't you send someone to take a look? It's not that far. It's only a 10-minute drive, right?" Gu Yanran said in surprise. She looked up from her breakfast in the garden pavilion to look at her employee. "We've sent people over but there's no reply from these people." Gu Yanran's brows furrowed. She stood up abruptly and cursed under her breath. Someone must have found out. It was too late. Gu Yanran's expression darkened, and she immediately made a decision. "Quick! Bring more people and inform the security company. Ask them to provide military support. I'll go with you," she ordered loudly as she took out her phone to send a text requesting help. After sending the text, she threw down the white napkin and quickly turned to leave. Gu Yanran was in such a hurry that she even tripped on the leg of the dining table and pulled the white tablecloth off the dining table. The beautiful silverware on the dining table clattered on the floor, but she didn't even look at it and hurried away. The hospital's discharge procedures were finally completed after 40 minutes. Although Hua Xiaoheng and the others were a bit anxious, they didn't appear to be in a rush to avoid alerting the enemy. They had cut off the hospital's external communications anyway, so they weren't afraid of these people causing trouble. The hospital's director personally came to Gu Xiangwen's room and looked at Gu Nianji. "You're Mr. Gu's youngest daughter? I don't think I've heard of you before." "Really?" Gu Nianji tilted her head and smiled. She looked cute. "Why haven't I heard of you before? Didn't my sister mention me?" "Your sister? Oh, Miss Gu?" She didn't say anything. The director studied Gu Nianji and clicked his tongue. "You're Miss Gu, but you don't look like your sister at all." "We're not twins, so of course we don't look alike," Gu Nianji said slyly as she showed the new identity document the Barbados government had issued for her to the director. "Look, this is my identity document. The government seal is on it. If you don't believe me, you can go to the relevant government departments to check again and you'll know what's going on. But our hospital's phone and internet are having some problems, so we can't contact the relevant government departments for now. The director still wanted to stop her. Why don't you wait a little longer? That's your problem, not ours. We'll provide whatever conditions you need. We have no obligation to fulfill the new conditions that were issued at the last minute. Gu Nianji's expression darkened as she blurted out fluent British English. Her demeanor was both reserved and arrogant, perfectly portraying the rudeness of a rich princess. The director bossed around reasonable people, but kept quiet out of fear when it came to unreasonable people. That was because the rich people he had dealt with in Barbados were all arrogant and reserved. Now he was certain that Gu Nianji was the youngest daughter of the Gu family. Yin Shixiang came in with 4 or 5 strong men to carry the unconscious Gu Xiangwen onto a stretcher. This was a stretcher that Chenlai had prepared. It had been urgently flown in from Europe and contained all the necessary drugs and equipment for the vegetative patient. Gu Xiangwen was simply moved from one bed to the next. Even the drugs she was injected with didn't change at all. Let's go. Hua Xiaoheng waved his hand and gave Yin Shixiang a look. Yin Shixiang nodded and led his men to push Gu Xiangwen out. As soon as they reached the hallway, there were already 2 identical stretchers parked there. Each one had a vegetative patient, sleeping on it. These were props they had arranged to confuse others so that no one would know their true location. However, they had underestimated the enemy's mobility. Or rather, they had never figured out who the enemy was or where they were. The 3 stretchers hadn't even reached the elevator when a loud explosion rang out in front of the building. Get down? Hua Xiaoheng's intuition told him that the explosion was right under their feet. He picked up Gu Nianji and rolled forward to quickly roll to the wall by the door. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions rang out from outside the building. The entire building was immediately engulfed in thick smoke. The bomb in front of the building had directly blown a hole through the building. From the front of the building, one could see the rocky mountain and shrubs behind it. Yin Shixiang protected his men and Gu Xiangwen as they were pushed back to the door of the ward. He looked out the window and saw several masked men in black with flamethrowers on their backs spitting fire as they headed towards the building. Hua Xiao, hurry up and get them out of here. I'll cover you. Yin Shixiang took out his AMR from the stretcher and aimed it at the window. Bang! A heavy sniper bullet spun out and knocked the masked man in black who was charging at the front to the ground. Hua Xiaoheng jumped up from the ground and took out another AMR from under the stretcher. He didn't even need to aim. He aimed directly at the flamethrower on the masked man Yin Shixiang had knocked out and fired. Boom! There were 2 flamethrower fuel tanks on the masked man's back. One was high-quality nitrogen while the other was full of gasoline. One AMR bullet was enough to detonate all the nitrogen inside and ignite the gasoline. With such intense flames, the masked man in black was almost completely burned to ashes in less than a minute. Most people would be scared and run away when they saw such a tragic scene. However, the remaining masked men were obviously not ordinary people. Not only did they not retreat but they also went all out. They aimed their flamethrowers at the direction of the 3rd floor where the bullets had come from. The tongues of fire were like demons from hell as they swept towards the windows on the 3rd floor. Hua Xiaoheng and Yin Shixiang quickly crouched on the ground. The huge flames flashed over their heads and quickly disappeared, leaving only thick black smoke. Gu Nianji lay prone at the foot of the wall by the door of the ward. It was the same spot where Hua Xiaoheng had rolled down with her in his arms. She watched the scene unfold with her heart pounding. She couldn't stop the panic in her heart. When the tongue of flame had swept over, she had seen Hua Xiaoheng standing not far in front of it. She had almost screamed out loud. She quickly stuffed her fist into her mouth to not cause more trouble for Hua Xiaoheng and the others. Call the police. Quick, call the police. I can't get through to the phone. Run, run. These robbers don't want to live. The director of the hospital and Gu Xiangwen's caretakers, as well as the medical staff in the building, ran around in panic. Hua Xiaoheng couldn't stand it anymore and said to Yin Shixiang, take them out from the back door. I'll stay here and attract their firepower. No, I'll cover you. Hua Xiao, take them away. Yin Shixiang objected. He couldn't put Hua Xiaoheng in danger again. That's an order. Hua Xiaoheng didn't say anything else and sat up from the ground. He pushed the clip into the custom-made AMR in his hand. Your shooting isn't as accurate as mine. I can escape unscathed but you can't. Leave now. This wasn't the time to be wishy-washy and give in. Yin Shixiang didn't insist after failing to object. He knew his shooting wasn't as accurate as Hua Xiaoheng's, but he didn't think Hua Xiaoheng would be able to escape unscathed. However, Gu Xiangwen and Gu Nianji needed him to safely send them away, so he left first and came back to help Hua Xiaoheng. Then Huoxiao, be careful. I'll be leaving first. Yin Shixiang left the AMR to Huoxiaoheng and took out 2 semi-automatic submachine guns from under the stretcher. He carried Gu Xiangwen up from the stretcher and tied it to his body. He crawled to Gu Nianji and stuffed one of the semi-automatic submachine guns into her hands. Take it and come with me. Protect my back. If you see anyone charging at you, shoot them hard. This was the first chapter, 3,000 words. Just a reminder for the monthly votes and recommendation votes. Today was New Year's Eve, so I'd like to wish everyone a happy new year. Did people still read novels at night? Was there still an update at 7 p.m.? Chapter 524. Gu Nianji had trained with a semi-automatic machine gun when she was at the Wuxia Imperial Special Operations Forces base in Sea City. She hadn't touched it in years, but the feeling returned when she held the gun in her hands. She took the semi-automatic machine gun from Yin Shixiang's hands with a stern face and reloaded it a few times. After familiarizing herself with it, she followed Yin Shixiang to the stairs on the other side of the hallway. Follow me. Gu Nianji waved her hand and the hospital director, nurses and guards quickly followed and ran to the stairs. Yin Shixiang carried Gu Xiangwen on his back as he ran in a crouch. Gu Nianji hugged the semi-automatic machine gun and followed behind him, constantly keeping an eye out for any movement behind them. Huoxiaoheng raised the AMR alone and constantly switched positions at the windows on the 3rd floor. With every shot, a ball of black and red flames rose downstairs. His tall figure was hidden in the shadows beside the windows, and every shot took the life of a masked man downstairs. He was like a judge from the underworld, ruling over life and death in the human world. The masked men downstairs were finally afraid and didn't dare to continue forward. They scattered and tried to find a place to hide. Huoxiaoheng discovered their movements and immediately issued an order through his communication system. Team A, 7 o'clock, 3 targets, over. Team B, 3 o'clock, 2 targets, over. Team C, 6 o'clock, 4 targets, over. Huoxiaoheng stood on the 3rd floor and looked down at the movement downstairs. He calmly reported the location and whereabouts of the masked gunman. Gu Nianji followed Yin Shixiang and the others down the stairs from the back door. Since Huoxiaoheng was attracting the enemy's firepower on the 3rd floor, they were unimpeded and quickly reached the 1st floor. However, the hospital director saw that there was no danger and didn't want to go with Yin Shixiang and Gu Nianji anymore. He secretly gave his men a look. They dawdled behind and watched Yin Shixiang and Gu Nianji leave before quickly rushing out of the building. Where are you going? Gu Nianji called out to them when she saw that they didn't run to the back of the mountain to hide and instead ran forward. The director only had time to wave back, but before he could speak, he was shot down by a black gun from the forest. Murder. They killed people. This is a hospital. You can't do that. The black female nurse suddenly burst with courage and angrily roared in the direction of the gunmen. However, the gunmen were obviously professional killers, cold-blooded and ruthless. They were not moved by the black female nurse's words at all. Bang. Another gunshot rang out, and the black female nurse also fell into a pool of blood. Gu Nianji hugged her semi-automatic submachine gun tightly and hid behind a rock with Yin Shixiang. She listened to the execution-like methods being carried out in front of her. Gu Nianji couldn't take it anymore and poked her head out from behind the rock. She raised her semi-automatic submachine gun and fired a volley of bullets at the shooters who were executing with handguns. Da-da-da-da. The semi-automatic submachine gun spat out flames and swept towards the gunman who was wreaking havoc. The gunman was quite happy shooting other people with a pistol, but when it was his turn to be sprayed by a submachine gun, he actually started screaming. However, he didn't scream for long before he fell to the ground and twitched, dying in a pool of blood. Yin Shixiang originally wanted to stop Gu Nianji, but seeing that the gunmen were so rampant and had killed everyone in the hospital, they would find them sooner or later. Therefore, he didn't stop Gu Nianji and only hid beside her to keep an eye on her. Gu Nianji ran out of bullets and the gunmen seemed to be frightened. They didn't come forward again and retreated into the forest. Yin Shixiang quickly pulled Gu Nianji in the other direction and whispered, "Let's go. They're going to use flamethrowers." As soon as he said that, a string of flames crawled up the rock they had been hiding behind. If they had still been hiding there, they would definitely have been burned to a crisp. Gu Nianji felt a lingering fear and tightened her grip on her gun. She ran even faster with Yin Shixiang. At that moment, other members of the Special Operations Forces who had come to pick them up had already arrived. They exchanged directions and addresses with Yin Shixiang through their Bluetooth headsets. They quickly eliminated the gunmen along the way and met up with Yin Shixiang. Why are there so many gunmen? Didn't we investigate before? Yin Shixiang asked the person who had come to pick them up with a gloomy expression. We did investigate, but this is Barbados, not our country. There are many things that even the government may not know about. The person also had a mask on his face. He must not have been able to reveal his identity in Barbados. He looked at Gun Yinji and Gu Xiangwen, who was on Yin Shixiang's back. Follow me. Our car is parked over there. We'll reach it from here. But Huo Xiao isn't here yet, Gun Yinji whispered. She looked in the direction of the building and refused to leave with them alone. Yin Shixiang also looked in that direction worriedly. How's Huo Xiao doing? Huo Xiao is clearing out the target, the person said simply and waved. Let's go. You won't be able to help here. But he's alone. Gun Yinji mumbled, her eyes still lingering in the direction of the building. Let's go. Yin Shixiang didn't say anything else. He grabbed Gun Yinji's arm and ran towards the door. Gun Yinji wanted to be with Huo Xiaoheng, but from the looks of things she would definitely be a burden to him if she went. She could only grit her teeth and leave with Yin Shixiang. They hadn't run far when she heard the gunshots and explosions behind her getting more intense. It was like the explosion scene in a Hollywood war movie. She couldn't help but stop and look back. She saw the building suddenly burst into flames. Thick smoke billowed and seemed to blacken the blue sky. Gun Yinji panicked and pulled Yin Shixiang to ask, Brother Xiong, what's going on over there? Is he going to be okay? Yin Shixiang turned to look, his heart pounding. He shared the information he heard from his Bluetooth headset with Gun Yinji. You should be fine. Huo Xiao lured most of the gunmen into the building so we could escape. What? Gun Yinji shuddered in shock. Her voice trembled so much she was about to cry. How could this be? There were so many people attacking him. No matter how good he was, there would be times when he couldn't see. Gun Yinji's eyes were red, but she forced herself not to cry. She looked at Yin Shixiang and said word by word, I want to go back and find him. You can't go. My mission is to send you and your father away. Yin Shixiang, who had always been easy to talk to, was now very strict and refused to bend the rules. He even wanted to tie Gun Yinji up with a rope to prevent her from running around. His colleagues were on guard with their guns. They looked back at the situation in the building and were also very worried. But a mission was a mission. Even if Huo Xiaoheng was in danger, they couldn't go save him because their mission was to send Gu Xiangwen to the plane. Go. The people next to Yin Shixiang pushed Gun Yinji. There's no time. Gun Yinji was pushed forward by them. She staggered forward but still kept looking back in the direction of the building. Huo Xiaoheng had noticed that the gunmen had suddenly surrounded the back of the building. He knew that Yin Shixiang and the others had been discovered. He immediately made a decision to run between the windows of the building to let people see him. As expected, the gunmen downstairs discovered him and immediately changed their route. They only sent a few people to the back of the building to investigate. Most of them ran into the building. Huo Xiaoheng immediately started a gun battle with them inside the building. It was like street fighting during World War II. This was the world of snipers. Every shot hit an enemy and every shot was fired in a different place. Huo Xiaoheng retreated from the third floor. He killed as many gunmen as he could while retreating downstairs. At the same time, he left enough detonators and explosives at the corners of the stairs. When he reached the exit of the first floor, Huo Xiaoheng turned around and fired wildly. The beam at the exit was riddled with holes. Soon it collapsed with a crash and the fallen bricks buried half of the exit. The gunmen chasing after him saw that the exit in front was blocked. They immediately turned around and ran to the back exit. Huo Xiaoheng had already calculated the time. As soon as he ran out of the front exit of the building, he detonated the remote-controlled explosives in his hands. Boom, boom, boom. An even louder explosion reverberated through the sky. A black mushroom cloud rose at the highest point. It was like a ferocious demon looking down on the earth. Gun Yinji and Yin Shixiang turned around together. They saw the huge explosion had caused the building to collapse. An exquisite and quiet three-story building had been reduced to ashes in front of them. Gun Yinji covered her mouth with her hand. Tears flowed uncontrollably. She desperately wanted to run back to find Huo Xiaoheng. Even if it was only his remains, Yin Shixiang and the two men couldn't hold Gun Yinji back. They were sweating profusely when they suddenly saw the smoke and fire in the nearby building. A tall figure stood up. He held an AMR in one hand and a semi-automatic submachine gun in the other. He walked out of the smoke and dust. The fire became the backdrop for his rise. He was like a god of war walking out of the sea of fire and explosion. He stood between heaven and earth. Gu Nianji wiped her tears with the back of her hand in disbelief. Her eyes were blurry, but she couldn't see who the person in front of her was. Her vision was extremely blurry. Tears streamed down her face. She wiped them again and again with her hand. Her face was dyed black and white like a kitten. But she couldn't care less. She watched as Hua Xiaoheng walked to her side and walked past her. He ordered everyone, "What are you waiting for? Retreat now. Let's go." Yin Shixiang ran out first. His colleagues from the Special Operations Forces followed. "Let's go." Hua Xiaoheng pushed Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji quickly ran forward. Hua Xiaoheng held the sniper rifle to cover their retreat. After rushing out of the building, they discovered that the entire hospital was in chaos. Patients, doctors, and nurses were running everywhere. No one knew what had happened. They were all screaming for help. Some hid in the wards, some hid in the woods, and some ran out of the hospital. The hospital guards were nowhere to be seen. Hua Xiaoheng and his men took advantage of the chaos to leave the hospital. They got into the jeeps they had parked nearby and sped to the airport. Gu Yanran's motorcade brushed past their car on the road. Something's wrong. Gu Yanran turned around and stared at the cars that had driven away. She then looked at the thick smoke billowing in the direction of the hospital. "I'm afraid we're too late. Go to the hospital to see what happened. You and him follow me to the airport. Now." Immediately. Gu Yanran ordered decisively. She took the other two cars and U-turned on the road to chase after the jeeps that had driven out earlier. This is the second chapter, 3,300 words. A reminder for the monthly votes and recommendation votes. Today is New Year's Eve. Wish everyone a Happy New Year. Who knows how many people are still reading novels on New Year's Eve? Did everyone receive the red envelopes from lunch? There will be more tomorrow at noon. Chapter 525. Hua Xiaoheng's jeep sped all the way and split into several identical jeeps at the exit of the highway. They drove in different directions to confuse the enemy. The car that was actually carrying Gu Xiangwen and Gu Nianji turned into a small road and took a shortcut to the airport. The enemy pursuing them was indeed confused and chased the Special Operations Forces camouflage car for a long time. They only realized they had been tricked when the car fell off the cliff. There was no one driving the car at all. It was a remote-controlled autonomous car, and the driver was a fake person. Of course, after falling off the cliff, the car and the fake person sank into the sea, so the enemy had no way of knowing the truth. We were tricked. The group of people gritted their teeth and returned to the hospital. Gu Yanran's car chased the camouflage car for a while and felt that something was wrong. She immediately said to her subordinates, "Stop chasing. Go straight to the airport." Her intuition told her that Hua Xiaoheng had taken her father away. As for how they did it, she would only know after her subordinates went to the hospital. Gu Yanran's antique Rolls-Royce Phantom was a modified bulletproof car. It was huge and much longer than normal cars, so it was very eye-catching on the highway. Seeing such a car, everyone consciously made way for it. Therefore, Gu Yanran had a smooth journey to the airport. When she arrived at the airport, her subordinates had just arrived at the hospital and were looking for the director and Gu Xiangwen's caretaker, as well as the relevant staff in the inpatient department to understand the situation. The hospital was still in a mess and communications had just been restored. After they called the police were still mobilizing the police force. There were only 600 soldiers in the country's regular army and less than 100 police officers. Even if all of them came, it wouldn't be enough. The fire engine had already arrived and was putting out the fire with a hose. No one was free to answer their questions. Gu Yanran arrived at the airport and went straight to the airport control center after getting out of the car. She could practically do whatever she wanted in Barbados, so she was also a VIP at the airport. She entered the control center like she was in a deserted area. The supervisor at the control center hurried over to greet her. The airport's air traffic controllers also came over to greet her. Gu Yanran nodded slightly at them and said, "I have something to trouble everyone with. Miss Gu, please tell us. As long as it's within our capabilities, we'll definitely do it immediately." The supervisor of the control center quickly fawned over her. "What do you want us to do for you?" Gu Yanran looked at the panoramic view of the airport outside the control tower and said in a low voice, "I want you to stop all flight and landing plans to give me time. I want to find someone very important to me." "Ah? Stop all flights? Furthermore, it has to stop landing?" The supervisor in the control center was stunned. This request was a little too much. Gu Yanran took a step forward and said anxiously to the supervisor, "My father has been taken away by someone. He might have to board those planes. I can't let them take my father away. Therefore you must order all flights to be grounded. I Gu Yanran will bear all the consequences for you." With that, she stuffed a thick envelope into the man's hand. That person's heart was on fire. What a thick stack of money! Just by feeling the texture he could tell that it was a dollar bill. I'll give it a try. The supervisor nodded pretentiously. "I hope it won't cause too much chaos. However, Miss Gu's father has been kidnapped. This is a serious emergency, no less than a terrorist attack on our Barbados airport. Therefore, I order all flights to be grounded. All flights entering Barbados will be temporarily diverted to Cuba and wait for further notice." The supervisor's order was passed to every air traffic control personnel in the control center. Although everyone was a little surprised since it was related to the Gu family, they tacitly agreed to the seriousness of the matter. Gu Yanran crossed her arms and stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in the control tower. Looking at the endless blue sky in front of her, her heart was burning with anxiety. Even her fingers were trembling slightly. Just as Gu Yanran's subordinates were searching for traces of Hua Xiaoheng and the others frame by frame in front of the airport control center's surveillance footage, a loud rumble suddenly came from the airport outside. A large passenger plane was gliding and was about to enter the airport's runway and take off. Gu Yanran's eyes widened and she suddenly put down her arms. She walked in front of the supervisor in the control center and said coldly, "Didn't I order all your flights to be grounded? What's going on with that plane?" The supervisor was also very surprised. He quickly looked up the information on the plane and said to Gu Yanran, "Miss Gu, this is a Wuxia Empire plane. They have a special permit so they can take off." What he meant was that he didn't have the authority to control Wuxia Empire planes. Gu Yanran was furious. Clenching her fists, her slender phoenix eyes widened. "What did you say? This is on Barbados soil, not the Wuxia Empire. Can't you have some guts?" "Miss Gu, this isn't a matter of guts. This is a matter of authority. We don't have the authority, so our orders can only be issued to the planes we can control. We can't do anything about the ones we can't control." Although the supervisor had taken Gu Yanran's money, he had no choice. It wasn't within his authority, so he couldn't neglect his duties even if he wanted to. Gu Yanran took a deep breath and tried her best to suppress her anger. She looked out the window and quickly thought of a solution. "How about this? Quickly sound the hurricane warning. According to the regulations, if there are signs of a hurricane, all flights will be grounded." There were indeed dark clouds in the sky outside. Calling it a hurricane was too much, but it was more like a thunderstorm. However, whether it was a hurricane or a thunderstorm was within the control of the control center. Even if it turned out to be a thunderstorm later, it would be within the normal error range of the weather forecast. It wouldn't be considered as the control center overstepping its authority to ground the Wuxia Empire planes. Okay. The supervisor was overjoyed and accepted Gu Yanran's suggestion. He immediately sounded the orange warning. This time it was a hurricane warning. All planes, including Wuxia Empire planes with special flight rights, had to be grounded. Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng sat in the first-class cabin with Gu Xiangwen. In fact, almost half of the people on the plane were from the Special Operations Forces. Because Hua Xiaoheng had mobilized almost all the elites of the Special Operations Forces in South America for this operation, this meant that these people had already been exposed and couldn't stay here. They had to return to the Wuxia Empire. Therefore, this plane could be considered a charter plane for the Special Operations Forces. Yin Shixiang, Zhao Liangzi, Chen Lai, and Yi Zitan were also in the first-class cabin. Chen Lai and Yi Zitan took care of Gu Xiangwen and Zhao Liangzi at the same time. Zhao Liangzi's condition was very good. He recovered quickly and didn't have any sequelae. Gu Xiangwen was different. He was in a vegetative state and was blocked by gunmen when they took him out of the hospital. Chen Lai didn't use the stretcher that he had carefully prepared. His medicine supply was interrupted for a while, so his condition worsened. As Chen Lai measured Gu Xiangwen's vital signs, he shook his head. The medical standards in Barbados are too poor. They can't even provide basic nutrition. Even a real plant is almost at the end of its life, let alone a vegetative person. Hua Xiaoheng didn't say anything. He sat by the window, his vigilant gaze still fixed on the outside. As long as the plane didn't take off, he couldn't relax. Gu Nianji's seat was next to Hua Xiaoheng, but she didn't sit in her own seat. Instead, she followed Chen Lai and Yi Zitan to take care of Zhao Liangzi and Gu Xiangwen. The plane's engine rumbled loudly. The plane had already begun gliding and was about to enter the airport's runway. However, after a short while the plane stopped. Hua Xiaoheng silently stood up and strode to the pilot's cockpit. What happened? Why did the plane stop? Hua Xiaoheng asked in a low voice. Our plane has special flight rights. We can ignore them. Earlier, when the airport control center suddenly ordered all flights to stop, Hua Xiaoheng knew that someone was chasing them. However, he didn't care because their plane had special flight rights from Huaxia Airlines and could take off at any time. But why did it stop now? Sir, the Barbados airport issued an orange weather alert. There's a hurricane coming. The pilot in the cockpit quickly explained to Hua Xiaoheng. Look, hurricane? Hua Xiaoheng frowned and looked at the sky through the cockpit's transparent window. It was indeed covered in dark clouds. However, Barbados was a rainforest country. Thunderstorms were common. Of course, hurricanes were also common. Should he forcefully take off and leave Barbados immediately? Or should he wait and see if there really was a hurricane? Hua Xiaoheng returned to the first-class cabin. Before he could figure it out, Gu Yanran had already brought her people to the Huaxia Airlines plane. I want to see Mr. Hua. Gu Yanran held the walkie-talkie and connected to the cockpit of the Huaxia Airlines plane. She said to the captain, I'm Gu Yanran. Please let Mr. Hua come down to speak. The captain was silent for a while. Mr. Hua? May I ask which Mr. Hua is this? There are many people on the plane. If I only said Mr. Hua, I'm afraid it won't be easy to find him. I advise you not to play word games with me, Gu Yanran said word by word. I didn't say his name because I don't want to make a big deal out of this. After all, Mr. Hua took my father illegally. If I reveal his name, the Huaxia Empire will be the one humiliated. The captain listened to Gu Yanran's threat without batting an eyelid. He understood that she was well aware of Hua Xiaoheng's identity and that there was indeed a vegetable on the plane that they had picked up from Barbados. Putting down the walkie-talkie, the captain personally went to the first-class cabin to see Hua Xiaoheng. Chief, there's a Miss Gu outside. She specifically wants to see you. She said you illegally took her father. Of course, the captain didn't think what Hua Xiaoheng did was illegal. He was only repeating Gu Yanran's words. Illegally? If she says it's illegal, then it's illegal? Is she the law of Barbados? How shameless. Gu Nianji heard it from the side and stood up. Hua Xiao, I'll go down to see her. Hua Xiaoheng also stood up. His expression was calm. Let's go together. Since he couldn't leave, he would lay his cards on the table. This is the first 3,000-word update. A reminder for the monthly votes and recommendation votes. Today is the first day of the new year. Happy New Year, everyone. Have you had dumplings? Thank you to Mama Shermeni for the Hesperian Jade yesterday. Thank you to Enigma Yangxi for the Hesperian Jade yesterday. Let's add one more update at 7 p.m. Remember to come to the Major General's office at noon to get a red packet. Just click to the end of the chapter and read the password. Chapter 526. The cabin door of the Huaxia Airlines passenger plane slowly opened, and a tall and imposing man walked out. He looked up, and his impeccably handsome face was like a white light that illuminated the slightly gloomy sky. The people below the plane couldn't help but look away, afraid to look at the tall man standing at the cabin door. The man was Hua Xiaoheng, and Gu Nianji followed him out of the cabin. She stood beside Hua Xiaoheng and glanced down. Gu Yanran's eyes were dark and bottomless. Her gaze didn't fall on Hua Xiaoheng but on Gu Nianji, who was standing beside him. Their eyes met in the air and they looked at each other silently. Hua Xiaoheng led Gu Nianji down the temporary stairs and stopped not far from Gu Yanran. Miss Gu, may I ask why you were looking for us? Gu Nianji was the first to speak. She smiled sweetly and her large eyes blinked. Her long eyelashes seemed to have the power to enchant people like butterfly wings. However, Gu Yanran was unmoved. She looked away from Gu Nianji to Hua Xiaoheng and said in a low voice, Mr. Hua, may I ask why you illegally took my father away from the hospital? Hua Xiaoheng folded his hands behind his back and didn't say a word. He only raised his chin slightly and looked into the distance. He didn't look at Gu Yanran. Illegally? It was Gu Nianji who spoke again. Miss Gu, what evidence do you have to prove that we did so illegally? Then you admit that you took my father away? Gu Yanran instinctively caught the loophole in Gu Nianji's words and immediately retorted. Isn't that illegal? Miss Gu, we took old Master Gu away because you entrusted us to do so. Secondly, we followed the hospital's regulations and went through the legal procedures to take old Master Gu out of the hospital. How can you accuse us of illegally right off the bat? Gu Nianji spread her hands and looked like she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Gu Yinran's eyes narrowed and she retorted, "Yes, I entrusted Mr. Hua to take my father to your country, but not now. We didn't even agree on a time. Mr. Hua, am I right? Secondly, without me, how did you go through the legal procedures to take my father out of the hospital? The hospital is now in a sea of fire like hell on earth. Isn't it irrefutable evidence that you took my father away by force?" Hua Xiaoheng smiled and coughed noncommittally. He looked at Gu Nianji and gestured for her to continue. Gu Nianji was encouraged and her reasoning became more fluent. "First of all, you said that the time hasn't been set, but I said that the time has been set. On this point we both have our own opinions, so let's put it aside for now. Secondly, of course we went through the legal procedures according to the rules of the hospital. If you don't believe me, you can go to the hospital to check. According to the rules of the hospital, only immediate family members can take my father out of the hospital." Gu Yinran crossed her arms and smiled. She looked at Gu Nianji warmly and looked like she had already won. She was not as aggressive as she had been earlier. "I'm the only direct relative of my father left in this world, and I definitely did not come out to receive my father from the hospital. So how are you going to explain the legal procedures? Gu Nianji, I advise you to stop being so stubborn and unreasonable." "I'm resisting stubbornly and twisting words?" Gu Nianji laughed softly. Her laughter was as clear as a silver bell. Hua Xiaoheng looked up and was about to say something when Gu Yinran's phone suddenly rang. She picked it up and saw that it was one of the subordinates she had sent to the hospital. There was also a text message telling her to answer the phone no matter what because they had important news to report. Gu Yinran hesitated and said to Hua Xiaoheng, "Excuse me, I have to take this call." She held the phone and walked to the side to face Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng. She put the phone to her ear and said, "Speaking." The person on the other side of the phone immediately said anxiously, "The director here said that they found your sister, and it was your sister who personally took old Master Gu out of the hospital." "What nonsense are you talking about?" Gu Yinran was furious and the veins on her neck bulged. She lowered her voice and squeezed out the words through her teeth. "What sister? How can they believe such a third-rate lie? Our corporation invests so much money into their hospital every year, but they only support a bunch of idiots." She was so angry that she almost fainted. However, the person on the other side of the phone continued to explain to her what had happened that day. "They brought government identification documents to prove that Miss Gu is your sister and also old Master Gu's immediate family. She requested to take old Master Gu out of the hospital, and according to regulations the hospital must agree." Gu Yinran's hand trembled. "What? Miss Gu, you mean? Gu Nianji?" Her suspicious eyes moved to Gu Nianji, who was standing beside Hua Xiaoheng. Gu Nianji looked much more mature in her camouflage hunting clothes, but her large eyes were still clear and pure like an 18-year-old girl's. Turning her back to Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji, Gu Yinran calmed down and said to the person on the other side of the phone, "What evidence do they have? Do you know?" The person on the other side of the phone immediately said, "I scanned the documents. Would Miss Gu like to see it?" "Send it to me." Gu Yinran put the phone away and turned to look at Gu Nianji. Her dark eyes were bottomless. Gu Nianji had already heard bits and pieces of what Gu Yinran had said, so she knew it was a call from the hospital. If she had already established contact with them, then what happened at the hospital could no longer be hidden from her. Gu Nianji didn't want to hide it either. She looked at Gu Yinran and tilted her head slightly. Spreading her hands she said, "Although I don't have much of an impression of you, unfortunately, I happen to be Gu Nianji from the Gu family. Gu Xiangwen is my father, so I can legally take him out of the hospital. Are you surprised?" "That's impossible." Gu Yinran blurted out. She looked Gu Nianji up and down again, her eyes cautious and uncertain. "You don't look anything like my sister when she was young. What's the point of a DNA test if we can only rely on our eyes?" Gu Nianji snorted and took out the 2 photocopies of identification she had prepared. "Here, look. These data prove that I am Gu Nianji from the Gu family. Gu Xiangwen's daughter, Gu Nianji. Do you still have any doubts?" Gu Yinran still stared at Gu Nianji and took the photocopies from her in disbelief. There were signatures from the dentist and doctor, proving that the Gu Nianji in front of her was the same person as her sister, Gu Nianji, who had gone missing on the Caribbean Sea 7 years ago. Gu Yinran skimmed through the data and proof and stumbled back a few steps. She looked up and stared at Gu Nianji. Her expression was a mixture of sadness and joy. It was indescribable. Gu Nianji waited quietly for a while before saying calmly, "So, Mrs. Gu, we did not illegally take my father away. It is only right and proper for a daughter to take her father out of the hospital." "A daughter takes her father out of the hospital?" Gu Yanran repeated Gu Nianji's words in a murmur. Her expression was so nervous that it was a little stiff. She continued to stare at Gu Nianji. If her gaze had substance, Gu Nianji's face would have been pierced through. Yes, the daughter is a direct relative. According to the hospital's rules, she can take him out of the hospital. Gu Nianji was still not used to calling Gu Xiangwen father or father, so she vaguely used he instead. Gu Yanran's body was still trembling. She looked in Gu Nianji's direction, and a trace of fear flashed in the depths of her eyes. However, it quickly disappeared in the darkening sky. Thunder rumbled in the sky, and a rapid thunderstorm was imminent. "Mrs. Gu, it's going to rain soon. If you still can't accept the fact that I am Gu Nianji from the Gu family, you can go back and digest this. You don't have to stand here in the rain. Okay, we have to get back to the plane and get ready to leave." Gu Nianji nodded at Gu Yanran and turned to follow Hua Xiaoheng to the plane. Hua Xiaoheng didn't say a word from beginning to end. He stood to the side like a bystander, but he saw everything. Gu Yanran looked down at the data and proof again. Her body trembled uncontrollably. She couldn't believe her eyes, and the expression on her face was indecipherable. Could she really be Nianji? Could her sister really be back? This is the second update. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. Chapter 527. Nianji. You're really my sister Nianji? But you don't look like you did when you were little? Gu Yanran took a step closer to Gu Nianji and slowly reached out to touch her cheek. Gu Nianji instinctively tilted her head and took a step back. She didn't want Gu Yanran to touch her face. Gu Yanran's hand paused in midair for a moment before falling. Her eyes were instantly filled with tears. "Nianji? Are you really Nianji?" Gu Yanran asked again, her face full of shock. After a while, she closed her eyes as if she was slowly recovering from the shock. The incredulous expression slowly faded and was replaced by an indescribably complex expression. She opened her eyes and looked at Gu Nianji as if she had never seen her before and wanted to carve her face into her heart. The expression on his face slowly became excited again, like a family member who had just reunited after a long time, and was afraid to acknowledge him as he approached his hometown. In just a few minutes, Gu Yanran's emotions seemed to have gone through a roller coaster ride. Gu Nianji saw this and her tense expression relaxed. She nodded and her voice softened. "This evidence already proves that I am the Gu Nianji of the Gu family. As for looks, no one can guarantee that they will grow up to look exactly the same as when they were little, right? Therefore, Miss Gu using this reason to deny that I am the Gu Nianji of the Gu family doesn't seem to be a good enough reason." No, I didn't mean to deny it. I was just too shocked and happy." Gu Yanran's tears kept falling as she looked at Gu Nianji with mixed emotions. "Nianji, where have you been all these years? What happened all those years ago? How did you?" Gu Yanran looked at Hua Xiaoheng beside Gu Nianji. According to what she knew, Gu Nianji had grown up with Hua Xiaoheng, but Hua Xiaoheng was a soldier of the Wuxia Empire. Where did he meet Gu Nianji? Hua Xiaoheng finally said calmly, "We'll talk about what happened all those years ago in the future. If Miss Gu doesn't object, our plane is about to take off." Gu Yanran's eyes dimmed as she looked back and forth between Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng. Finally, she sighed deeply and said, "Mr. Hua, even if Nianji really is my sister, what you're doing is too unkind. Nianji is my sister, but the person you took away was my father. Have you ever thought about how I feel as a daughter?" The corners of Hua Xiaoheng's lips curled up as he casually stuck one hand in his trouser pocket and held Gu Nianji's arm with the other. He smiled at Gu Yanran. "If it weren't for the fact that Miss Gu refused to go, we wouldn't have to resort to this. All right, now that Miss Gu has acknowledged Nianji's identity, there's no more misunderstanding. Can we go now?" Gu Yanran gripped her small handbag tightly, the veins on the back of her hand bulging. Would it be useful for her to say no at this time? No matter how high her status was in Barbados in the eyes of the Wuxia Empire, even the governor of Barbados was nothing, let alone her. They shouldn't have lived in seclusion in such a small country. Gu Yanran suppressed the regret and dissatisfaction in her heart and nodded. She said slowly, "Okay, since Mr. Hua insists and we have an agreement, you can take my father away first. But please allow me to investigate whether Gu Nianji is really my sister or not. After all, the Gus have a large business. Not everyone can enter just because they want to. However, Gu Nianji had never thought of returning to the Gu family to be the youngest daughter. She revealed her identity only to bring Gu Xiangwen back to the Wuxia Empire legally. She raised a brow and smiled at Gu Yanran. You can investigate as long as you want, Miss Gu. After all, in Miss Gu's eyes, the Gus have a large business and are more important than my father. So we can take my father away, but it's not easy for me to enter the Gus. Is that what you mean? Gu Yanran was stunned but quickly smiled. Nianji, don't worry. I'll confirm it again and go to the Wuxia Empire to find you soon. The Gus only have us two sisters, so we have to get along well. Take good care of my father. I'll go to the Wuxia Empire after I settle things here. Gu Yanran compromised and actually allowed Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji to take Gu Xiangwen away. Hua Xiaoheng didn't expect this to be resolved so easily. He looked at Gu Yanran and bowed. Thank you for your understanding, Miss Gu. We'll meet again in the Wuxia Empire. Okay, my father was taken away by you. I'll definitely go find you. Gu Yanran calmed down and took out a small wet wipe to wipe her tears. She smiled through her tears. Please leave your contact details, Mr. Hua. I don't want to go to the Wuxia Empire and still have to look for you online. Gu Yanran was Gu Xiangwen's daughter, so they had to keep in touch with her. Hua Xiaoheng didn't object and called Yin Shixiang down. Leave your contact details for Miss Gu. We'll go first. Hua Xiaoheng put an arm around Gu Nianji's waist and nodded to Gu Yanran. He turned around and led Gu Nianji up the temporary stairs of the plane. Gu Yanran looked away from Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji and looked at the smiling Yin Shixiang. How long have you been planning this? It's all a coincidence. It's all a coincidence. How could there be planning? Yin Shixiang denied it, of course. He gave Gu Yanran the phone number of the Special Ops Public Relations Department. You only have to call this number to find me. Gu Yanran took the business card from Yin Shixiang and smiled at him. I'll definitely pay you a visit. My father is in your hands, so please take good care of him. Don't slack off. I have to check on him. Oh? Is that so? Yin Shixiang also smiled. He remembered Qinlai had said that Gu Xiangwen was being taken care of to the point of death. He couldn't help but say, then you should quickly go to the hospital here to check. They've been taking care of your father to the point of death. What? How is that possible? Gu Yanran was so shocked that her expression changed. That hospital practically relies on our family's support to operate. How dare they? I don't know about that. Yin Shixiang said as he handed Gu Yanran a medical report that Qinlai had asked him to bring down. This is the medical report our doctor just did on your father. Look at the health data and you'll know how the hospital takes care of your father. Gu Yanran took the medical report suspiciously and glanced at it quickly. The more she read, the darker her expression became. Finally, she clenched her teeth and almost tore the report to pieces. How dare they? She bowed to Yin Shixiang. Please take good care of my father. Please. Yin Shixiang was shocked. He didn't expect Gu Yanran, who had come so aggressively to arrest them, to give up so easily. I'm going to investigate Miss Gu's identity now. Also that hospital. If they really treated my father like this, I'll make them pay. Gu Yanran's fair face was flushed, and her hands were still trembling. It was obvious that she was still shocked by this sudden development. Her little sister, who had been missing for almost 7 years, had suddenly reappeared. She was already a grown woman. She must be feeling very emotional, right? Gu Yanran turned and hurried away with her people. Yin Shixiang looked at Gu Yanran's lonely figure as she walked in the middle of the crowd. His impression of her changed a lot. Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng returned to the plane. They were also not used to the situation just now. She actually let us go? Gu Nianji muttered to herself. She propped her head on her seat and stared blankly at the scenery outside the plane window. Hua Xiaoheng sat next to her and turned to look at her. Don't think about it. It would have ended the same way even if she didn't agree. I think she just knows how to adapt to the circumstances. A wise man submits to the circumstances. She knew that she couldn't fight them head-on now. Could she go against the entire Wuxia Empire by herself? In my opinion, your sister is very realistic. She doesn't waste her time and immediately changes direction when things go south. She is indeed a qualified businesswoman. Hua Xiaoheng picked up a business magazine in the first-class cabin and flipped through it. He had a better opinion of Gu Yanran. Gu Nianji leaned against the railing of her seat and said quietly, "You're already calling her sister? I haven't even called her that yet." Hua Xiaoheng flipped a page of the magazine nonchalantly and said in a low voice, "Whether you admit it or not, legally she is your sister. So you have to quickly adjust your attitude." Logic was logic, but Gu Nianji felt uncomfortable hearing it from Hua Xiaoheng's mouth. She looked at Hua Xiaoheng and pouted. Then whose side are you on? Father, I'm involved too. Hua Xiaoheng turned to look at her and pinched her delicate little nose. Do I even need to say whose side I'm on? Big Xiong was right. You're a little heartless girl. Yin Shixiang, who had been eavesdropping on their conversation from the front row, wished he could slide under his seat. He felt wrong that he had to be implicated even when he was eavesdropping. Gu Nianji finally smiled and moved closer to Hua Xiaoheng. She whispered, Then how will Hua Xiao punish me? Her sweet and soft voice had a seductive quality to it. Hua Xiaoheng's heart tightened. He continued flipping the magazine nonchalantly and said, Punish you? We'll talk about it when we get back. I'll write it down first. Gu Nianji was about to speak again when the captain's voice came over the plane's PA system. He told everyone to fasten their seatbelts because the plane was about to take off. Gu Nianji quickly sat down and didn't speak. After the plane took off, it quickly soared into the clouds and flew towards the Huaxia Empire using the shortest route. The flight took more than 10 hours and crossed more than half the world before finally landing at the Huaxia Empire's capital airport. As soon as the plane stabilized, Hua Xiaoheng had arranged for members of the Special Operations Forces with ambulances and large vans to be on standby in front of the plane. They disembarked from the plane and didn't go through customs. They directly took the Special Operations Forces car out of the airport and drove to the Special Operations Forces headquarters. General Ji and Speaker Long, as well as Minister Bai, who was currently replacing Prime Minister Dou in the Huaxia Empire, were already waiting for them at the headquarters. This is Gu Xiangwen? General Ji walked up excitedly to look at the emaciated and motionless Gu Xiangwen lying on the mobile stretcher. This is the first update of 3,000 words. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. Today is the second day of the new year. Happy New Year, everyone. What are we eating today? Thank you to Xiao Yi for kissing the Heshabi yesterday. Mwah. There will be an extra update at 7 p.m. Remember to come to the Major General's office at noon to get your red packet. Just click to the end of the chapter and read the password. Chapter 528. Speaker Long and Minister Bai walked over and stood on either side of General Ji. They looked curiously at Gu Xiangwen, who was lying on the stretcher. Yes, he hasn't woken up yet. We need to rush him to the ward for emergency treatment. Qin Lai followed closely behind the stretcher. He nodded at General Ji, Speaker Long, and Minister Bai before quickly ordering for Gu Xiangwen to be wheeled away. Hua Xiaoheng stayed behind to report the trip to Barbados to the three chiefs. So, someone wants Gu Xiangwen's life in Barbados? Speaker Long frowned. What exactly happened? Did you find out? No, we didn't have enough time. Our mission this time is to bring Gu Xiangwen back, so we can't complicate things. Hua Xiaoheng sat down in front of the three chiefs of the empire. I also need to report to you about the situation in Barbados. General Ji nodded, his hands clasped together on the conference table. Wearing his reading glasses, he lowered his head and looked at Hua Xiaoheng over the top of his glasses. Tell me, why did you almost get into trouble in Barbados? General Ji was shocked when he called in the middle of the night to urgently request for a helicopter from the Cuban military. Hua Xiaoheng was the successor he had painstakingly trained. He couldn't let him die in a small place like Barbados without knowing why. That incident had a lot to do with Gu Xiangwen. Hua Xiaoheng began to describe the electric fence in the blue hole near the Goose Island. We and the United States are the two countries with the furthest research on electric fences, but neither is as good as Gu Xiangwen's electric fence. Or I should say it's far inferior. How far? Minister Bai asked gravely. We can't underestimate ourselves. It's not a matter of underestimating ourselves. Let's put it this way. The electric fence we're researching now is like the peak technology of the cold weapon era, while Gu Xiangwen's electric fence is nuclear weapon technology. That's the difference. As soon as Hua Xiaoheng finished speaking, the conference room fell silent. After a while, Speaker Long said hoarsely, Are you sure? You're not exaggerating? The electric fence is still in the blue hole. If you don't believe me, you can test it yourself. Hua Xiaoheng didn't continue to explain. The power of a weapon could only be seen by those who had seen it with their own eyes. Those who had never seen it would not be able to understand it with words and imagination alone. General Ji and Speaker Long looked at each other and didn't ask any more questions. Minister Bai knocked on the conference table and said, We should send someone over to take a look. Since it's so important, we can't give up on Barbados. Gu Yanran finally agreed to let us bring Gu Xiangwen back to the Huaxia Empire. She continued to investigate Gu Nianji's background in Barbados. The Barbados government has provided identification, but Gu Yanran still wants to check it herself. It's no wonder. It's normal for her to be cautious about such an important matter. Minister Bai said gently, but has Gu Nianji's identity been confirmed? Yes, she is Gu Xiangwen's youngest daughter. We have already obtained Gu Xiangwen's youngest daughter Gu Nianji's medical and dental records in Barbados. At the same time, we did a DNA test based on the blood sample she left with the family doctor in Barbados. It proves that her DNA is identical to the youngest daughter of the Gu family in Barbados. This proves that she is the youngest daughter of the Gu family in Barbados who went missing 7 years ago. Hua Xiaoheng took out the identification and passport issued by the Barbados government. Gu Nianji is now considered a Barbadian, but since she and her father, Gu Xiangwen, have made great contributions to the Wuxia Empire, I propose that Gu Nianji become a Wuxia citizen. The Wuxia Empire was not a country of immigration, so it was very difficult for foreigners to naturalize and become citizens. For decades, the Wuxia Empire had only accepted less than 500 foreigners to become citizens. Most of these people were foreign talents who had made special contributions to the Wuxia Empire, and most of them were of Chinese descent. You can apply for this and we will consider it. Minister Bai was now in charge of the cabinet government, so he was in charge of the naturalization of foreign citizens. Hua Xiaoheng smiled and leaned back in his chair. He looked at Minister Bai leisurely. How long will it take? I remember that if the conditions are met, there is a special processing time for this kind of situation. Minister Bai shook his head. These things have their own established procedures. Xiaoheng, I really can't give you a specific time. Hua Xiaoheng glanced at General Ji. General Ji shook his head slightly, so he didn't continue to ask. After understanding the situation, Speaker Long and Minister Bai left the Special Operations Forces headquarters. General Ji stayed behind. The Special Operations Forces had always been directly under the military, so General Ji had more control over it. General Ji, you have to urge them about Nianji. Hua Xiaoheng and General Ji walked to the Special Operations Forces medical building together. It was almost summer, and the path leading to the medical building was covered by greenery. The trees on the side of the road were verdant, and unknown wildflowers exuded their fragrance. From time to time, the crisp chirping of birds broke the silence of the base. General Ji laughed and teased Hua Xiaoheng. Minister Bai didn't say he wouldn't agree. Why are you in such a hurry? We saved her by a hair's breadth. Don't let those bureaucrats waste precious opportunities. Hua Xiaoheng stopped in his tracks and said meaningfully, Gu Yanran isn't someone who will give up easily. She's still confirming Nianji's identity. Once it's confirmed, she will definitely come to the Wuxia Empire to declare her sovereignty. You mean she will ask Gu Xiangwen and Gu Nianji to return to the Gu family? General Ji understood what Hua Xiaoheng meant and immediately said, then there's no need to say anything. I'll go discuss it with Old Long right away. The Senate has special authority regarding naturalization. If the Senate has already approved it, Old Bai's cabinet can't do anything about it. Hua Xiaoheng wanted a quick end to the battle. Gu Nianji's identity had been dragged on for too long. If he didn't take advantage of this opportunity to get rid of the problem in one go, who knew how much trouble there would be in the future? General Ji left the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces and went to Speaker Long's Senate to have a secret discussion with him for nearly 2 hours. In the evening, when the Ministry of the Interior was about to close, they received a call from the Senate saying that the Senate had just passed a special vote to accept 2 foreigners for naturalization. The relevant departments of the Ministry of the Interior were to immediately process the procedures without delay. The Department of the Interior in charge of naturalization was in an uproar. They had never encountered such a situation before. Although the Senate had the final authority, they had never exercised it before. This was the first time they had made an exception for Gu Xiangwen and Gu Nianji. Gu Xiangwen's value was too great, and Gu Nianji's blueprints from 7 years ago were enough to qualify as a person with special contributions. The relevant departments of the Ministry of the Interior immediately worked overtime to process the naturalization procedures for Gu Xiangwen and Gu Nianji. Official documents were sent out and stamped one by one. When they finally gathered on Minister Bai's desk, it was already the early hours of the next morning. Minister Bai saw that it was a special letter from Speaker Long and didn't obstruct it. He signed it with a flourish. From then on, Gu Nianji and Gu Xiangwen became citizens of the Wuxia Empire with Wuxia imperial passports and identification cards. Gu Nianji's trip to Barbados was extremely tiring. After returning, she went to her room to rest and slept for almost 24 hours. When she finally woke up, she looked at the light of dawn outside the window. She had a feeling that she didn't know what day it was. When she fell asleep, it seemed to be the first light of dawn. She didn't expect to wake up at this time. How long had she slept? Gu Nianji stretched and lifted the blankets to get out of bed. Just as she put on her shoes, she saw a burgundy booklet on the bedside table from the corner of her eye. She reached out to take it and saw that it was a new Wuxia imperial passport. Gu Nianji's name and photo were on it. Underneath the passport was a new identification card. It was different from the one she used before. What did this mean? Gu Nianji flipped the passport and identification card over and over again. Wu Xiaoheng knocked on the door and walked in. Seeing that she was finally awake, he said, "Hurry up and get up. Are you hungry? Breakfast is downstairs in the dining room." Gu Nianji held up the passport and identification card for Wu Xiaoheng to see. "Hu Xiao, what does this mean?" "Yeah, this is your new passport and identification card." Wu Xiaoheng sat down on the armchair beside her bed. "Your identity has been restored. You are now a naturalized citizen of our country." So her previous passport and identification card were invalid. Gu Nianji gasped and scratched her head. She smiled sheepishly. "I didn't think that even my identity would change after I woke up from my sleep." "Aren't you happy?" Wu Xiaoheng was a bit surprised. "Your current identity is the one with the real legal effect. Then I used a fake passport and identification card before?" Gu Nianji pursed her lips. "Why didn't you wait for me to wake up and ask me?" "You were sleeping too soundly, so I didn't wake you up." Wu Xiaoheng originally wanted to tell her that he had already prepared the marriage report as soon as the new passport and identification card were ready. He had just received the news that the military had begun a background check on Gu Nianji. However, seeing her listless expression, he swallowed his words. This is the second update. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.